That psychological pressure caused Coney to wake up from nightmares for many nights. But today, seeing the two clansmen beside her cheering nonstop, and a compliment about her foresight, made her briefly feel like she might be worrying too much. Old Sue is so strong. When the ocean floods in, he'll just lead the whole clan to the new continent. What's there to worry about? Truly, worrying for nothing. Before she could even discipline her two guards and tell them not to overdo it, a commotion had already started up ahead. Brother Sue is here. The day has finally come. Quiet down. Hurry up and line up. The ceremony is starting. I was clad in silver gray armor, with a pitch-black combat suit underneath, holding a custom-made long spear. This fully armed version of me was a rare sight for the villagers of Hope. Now that I suddenly appeared, the whole crowd instantly buzzed with excitement. Their eyes lit up, especially the women in the village. Even the men who once harbored heroic dreams felt their blood boil. A suit of armor like that, let alone in the wasteland, even on a cosplay stage back on Earth, it would be enough to captivate the entire hall. Chi-Chin stood up high, struck the gong hard, and helplessly shouted, "Get serious, everyone. It's not like this is your first time seeing Brother Sue. Why are you all looking at him like you've been struck by love at first sight?" If leaders elsewhere relied on power to secure their positions, then in Hope, Chi-Chin believed that even if I lost all my strength one day, my prestige and charisma alone would make my position as village chief unshakable. Following the crisp sound of the gong, the villagers finally woke from their daze and quickly fell into formation. After nearly 2 months of training, everyone standing in line exuded a clear military aura. Under the admiring gazes of all the villagers, I took a lap and walked up to the red archway. Chun-Shin followed closely behind me. As soon as he saw my signal, the person in charge handed me a connected microphone and speaker. Even in the Wasteland calendar, it was February 16th, 8:55 a.m. There were only 5 minutes left until the destroyer's ribbon-cutting ceremony. I knew that right now, everyone was trembling with impatience. Right? Thunderous applause erupted. From the day we left the plains and moved to the basin, from a precarious life to today's abundance, this ship has witnessed the entire journey of Hope Village. As the leader, there are many nights I still ask myself, if the person we followed back then wasn't Brother Sue, wasn't the God Sue in everyone's hearts, then when the ocean floods in, how helpless would we be? When facing thousands of ancients, would we still dare to stand firm? I feel that fate has smiled upon us. We were taken in by Brother Sue. He is the one who built this foundation, and he is also the one. Chun-Shin began his impromptu speech. Ever since my classic speech, the entire management of Hope practiced speaking every night. Now, Chun-Shin's speaking skills had visibly improved. He used the last 5 minutes to summarize the entire journey from the village's founding to our relocation here. Emotional, proud, and genuine. Below, the villagers' expressions shifted with every word. Sometimes they choked up remembering the hardships, and sometimes they clapped thunderously for today's achievements. I stood nearby, listening quietly without saying much, but I was truly satisfied. Just as he said, everyone present here was a chosen one. If they hadn't followed me, even with full bellies, they wouldn't know how to reach the new continent when the ocean arrived. They wouldn't be standing here right now, clean, high-spirited, and attending the inauguration ceremony of a destroyer. At exactly 9 o'clock, Chun-Shin's voice rang out powerfully. A bowl of rice, a sip of water. Remember the hardships it took to get them. A thread, a piece of cloth. Never forget that materials are hard to come by. Living in Hope Village, we must embrace hope. Protected by God Sue, we must engrave gratitude in our hearts. The time has come. I declare the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the destroyer begins. Firecrackers roared like thunder. Wu Feiguang lit the string of firecrackers hanging on the steps. Asterisk bang. Crackle. Asterisk the smoke of the firecrackers lingered. In that moment, it made people feel as if they had returned to a peaceful, warm earth. No longer fearing the present, no longer lost about the future. Amidst the deafening firecrackers, Chun-Shin stepped up and solemnly handed the microphone to me. The moment I took the mic, the crowd went wild. The applause was unanimous, orderly, and thunderous. I stood there, looking at their radiant, emotional faces. Countless prepared words suddenly vanished completely. No need for speeches, No need for rallying cries, no need for words. Just like Tony Stark, when he said, "I am Iron Man." One sentence was enough. For me, at this moment, just holding the scissors was enough. I tossed the mic aside. A heavy clack rang out. I pulled down my mask, revealing a resolute face. I stepped forward and reached out, snatching the scissors from Chun Shun's hands. One decisive snip cut the red ribbon in half. That single cut was like slashing through the fog before everyone's eyes. That single cut opened a new chapter for the wasteland. That single cut was humanity's declaration of returning to the Age of Steel. It was the bugle call of the Hope, preparing to rampage across the cruel ocean. The moment the silk ribbon fell, I clearly saw Chi-Chin and Chun Shun instantly understand my intention. I wanted the ceremony to be simple. Cut the ribbon, hang the plaque. That was enough. Chun Shun lightly waved his hand, and a wooden plaque was pulled straight out of thin air, falling into our hands as light as a feather. On the plaque was flowing Huaxia calligraphy, Liangcheng, Destroyer Model 03, Hope. Bright red background, dazzling gold characters. Under the sun after the rain, it seemed to glow on its own, drawing all the villagers' gazes. Taking steel as its body, taking hope as its name. On the future seas, this ship wasn't just the hope of the villagers, but also the supreme strategic symbol of humanity. Piloting this ship, I didn't just want to take my sister to the new continent. I also wanted to bring hope to those struggling in the storms of this world. I took the plaque and hung it solemnly and securely on the archway. Then, I jumped straight off the scaffolding, landing as lightly as a feather. The ribbon-cutting ceremony is over. Everyone board the ship. Today at noon, we eat on the ship. Boom! Applause and cheers erupted once again. I stood on the high platform, looking into the distance. The three Lionmen warriors were also clapping, as if wanting to blend into the general atmosphere. I gave a slight nod, then stepped through the red archway. Red cloth draped along the handrails, leading straight up to the main deck. Under the burning gazes of the villagers, I stepped up. A single, historic step. Every step on the wooden stairs echoed with a deep thud, like the beat of a drum opening a new era. The stairs were made of hardwood, and the scaffolding was as solid as steel. Even if 10 people went up at once, it wouldn't budge. Behind me, the management team followed, heading toward the deck 21 meters high. When it hits the water, the ship will lower to about 16 meters. Standing on the ground, plus the scaffolding, it was as tall as a 7-story building on Earth. The vast, unroofed space made everyone overwhelmed by the scale and engineering of the ship with every step they took. The hull was pieced together from countless steel plates, yet the joints were unbelievably seamless. A main seam ran along the hull, straight as the spine of a sword, carrying a distinct sense of combat readiness. Before even seeing the inside, the crowd was already boiling with excitement. By the time the last person set foot on the stairs, I had already stepped straight onto the main deck of the Hope. Bright yellow waterproof paint, interspersed with technical symbols, gave the steel ship a solid and powerful feel. A 3-story tower-style structure. The first floor, the control center, where all systems were operated. The machinery was fully installed, just waiting for me to bring up the computer, the soul of the ship. The second floor, the main command room. Inside was the management's meeting room. Outside was the open-air combat deck for observation during battles. The third floor, my captain's quarters. On normal days, this was where I lived and observed the entire ship. During combat, it transformed into a tactical observation deck. Above all 3 floors was the radar deck, housing the fire control radar and surveillance systems. Data was transmitted straight to the bridge, supporting rapid responses to any threats. Compared to modern warships, the Hope was inferior in radar and firepower, but in terms of AI, it wasn't far behind. Especially since it was hand-built by robots, the ship had 2 special abilities. As long as I installed the system, started the engine, and connected the power, I could open the ship's skill tree. Just one truly outstanding ability was enough to make up for any shortcomings. As the project lead, I had boarded the ship countless times to tweak the design. Now, stepping inside felt no different from coming home. The management team had also gotten used to the main deck while preparing the stage over the past few days. Taking advantage of the villagers not yet boarding, Pei Xiao climbed up to the bow and pulled out a giant flag. The flagpole was 3.5 meters tall, but the flag itself was a massive 2.88 by 1.92 meters, made of navy blue waterproof fabric, carrying an ancient military flavor. The front bore the two characters for hope, and the back had a large Sioux. The wind blew it up, radiating an imposing aura. Perfect. This was worth every penny. I nodded, truly satisfied. On the ship, everything could be skimped on, but not the flag. On the battlefield, soldiers could fall, but the flag could never fall. On the sea, this grand flag was my symbol and the soul of the hope. As our battle achievements piled up, just seeing this flag would make the enemy tremble. And most importantly, the flag united people's hearts. The villagers below stopped in their tracks the moment they saw the flag. When they first arrived at Juhua, everyone felt like they were just passing through. No one considered this place home. If they lost a battle, they were ready to pack up and leave. Wu Feiguang knew this well, but was helpless. Because they were transmigrators from Earth with principles and thoughts. They couldn't be forced or disciplined like an army. But then, everything changed the day I appeared. Right after the first assembly, Wu Feiguang was stunned to realize that the villagers' spirit had completely transformed. Not because they saw a future for the village, but because they saw hope when they were with me. That change made Wu Feiguang understand better than ever how crucial the soul of a leader was. That night, the position of village chief was officially handed over to Chen Shun. From the day of the harvest, to the migration to Found Hope Village, and to the moment the flag flew today, everything spoke for itself. A strange sense of belonging, a burning pride like a forgotten seed, now met the wind and rain, sprouting, blooming, and bearing fruit in everyone's heart. This is our village. This is our ship. When someone shouted those two sentences, the rest of the crowd instantly joined in, roaring as if they wanted to tear the sky apart. That's right, this was our ship. The ship that would carry the whole village across the sea to the new land. While other places only used wood, or medieval boats less than 10 meters long, our home had a modern warship. Just hearing the villagers' roars was enough for Chen Shun to understand. If anyone stood in front of them now and said a single bad word about Hope Village, they'd definitely get beaten to a pulp. That sense of honor absolutely allowed no offense. The cheering lasted for 4 or 5 minutes, as if venting 2 months of pent-up frustration. After that, the boarding ceremony officially began. Everyone climbed up so fast that in just over 10 minutes, the last person had boarded the deck. Everyone lined up neatly. The tour began. From the open-air command room on the second floor, the management team lined up horizontally. I stood at the railing, able to overlook all the villagers below. They could see me very clearly too. I gave a slight nod, observing for a few seconds. Village Chief Chen Shin stepped forward with a standard military march and shouted sternly. Reporting to the captain, I, Chen Shun, Chief of Hope Village, on behalf of all villagers, request permission to tour the Hope, requesting the commander's approval. A short, yet chillingly solemn ritual. From the first floor, Chi Chin pulled the lever hard. Rumble, the main deck opened up a large gap, revealing the passageway leading into the heart of the ship. 2 people per row, 10 people per group. They entered one after another as Wu Feiguang's voice rang out. The villagers followed the prearranged formation, heading down into the cabin one by one. The downward passage led straight to the living quarters, the beating heart of the ship. There were no smooth yacht finishes, no luxurious amenities. Warships only had one characteristic, practical and sturdy. The entire space was metal. Once out at sea, the ship would vibrate constantly. Therefore, I had the robots wrap all the sharp corners with soft cotton beforehand to reduce the risk of falls. As soon as they entered, the villagers immediately started buzzing. Whoa, this spot has my name on it. This is my room. And Zay, we're in the same room. Come look, quick. Are there any women's rooms left? I can sleep on the floor too. Goodness, this dorm is huge. Each dorm room was 20 square meters for 4 people. In the apocalypse, that was royal standard. The first floor had 35 completed rooms, accommodating 140 people, with 15 reserve rooms. After the 50 living quarters, rooms 51 to 60 were public areas, men's bathhouse, men's restroom, laundry room, medical room, kitchen, freshwater storage, and a mini gym. Common rooms, 10 in total, enough for daily needs. Rooms 61 to 64 were combined into a large meeting room. Luxuries like sports courts, badminton, and basketball were all cut. In the apocalypse, those things consumed unnecessary energy. A light gym was enough. The second floor was the material storage area for large, empty warehouses, but just looking at the 5-meter-high ceilings was enough to imagine what they'd look like fully stocked. The third floor was the power center. The engine, fuel lines, everything ran in a closed loop, keeping the ship alive. By nearly 11 o'clock, everyone had finished touring the 3 floors. Right then, the chef finished cooking a piping hot pot of mutton soup. The mutton was a drop reward, brought out for this special day. 1 bowl per person, warming them right up. Not bad. Everything went pretty smoothly. Sitting in the open-air command room, I watched the stream of people disembarking, then stood up. We can start loading supplies tomorrow. Oh, before we go, I'll leave some weapons for the village. Guns and ammo were always sensitive, and I used to control them strictly. But now that things were stable and I was about to set sail, I naturally had to leave something for self-defense. Shin stood at attention. Yes, Brother Su. I'll handle this. Go on. The disaster is coming. Everyone's busy. Hope Village still has 2 unfinished projects to complete. I watched Shin walk down the stairs, then looked at the crowd heading back to Ironstone Mountain. I stood still, took a deep breath, opened the friend panel, and sent a message. Less than a minute later, Pei Xiao and Zhong Qingshu, the 2 in charge of intelligence, quietly returned to the ship. Unnoticed and ignored by anyone, the 3 of us left the open-air command room and entered the large, secure meeting room, ensuring we wouldn't be eavesdropped on. As soon as I walked in and saw their grim faces, my heart sank. A bad premonition washed over me. You couldn't find them? 20,000 aliens, and they didn't leave a single trace. Under Pei Xiao's command, there were initially only 3 people. After the first gathering of intel, I added 3 more, making a total of 7. For a village of just over 150 people, dedicating 7 to intelligence was already a massive investment. If you included Zhong Qingshu, the liaison between the inside and outside, the team was 8 strong. Even if they were all amateurs, as long as they swept the terrain like a dragnet, how could an army of 20,000 aliens possibly leave no trace? Yet, the reality was too harsh. As soon as I spoke, not only did Pei Xiao stay silent, but even Zhong Qingshu, the toughest scout on the team, lowered her head in silence. Those 20,000 aliens aren't 200 or 2,000. I growled. They consume hundreds of units of supplies every day. And you're telling me you couldn't find a single sign? Seeing me start to lose my temper, Pei Xiao finally couldn't handle the pressure. His face twisted into an ugly grimace as he was forced to speak. It's not that we didn't try to find them, and it's not that we have a mole. These past few days, we drove the Earth Tiger and swept a 200-kilometer radius around our area. I even secretly took a voice recorder from the warehouse to monitor the guys on the team. Nothing unusual. In that entire area, there wasn't a single sign of the aliens. No people, no items, not even a crumb of food or a footprint. After speaking, Pei Xiao took out a massive map from his storage space and spread it flat on the meeting table. The map detailed the entire 200-kilometer radius around the shelter with extreme precision. Terrain, landmarks, directions, every detail was crystal clear. Even a layman could tell it was the result of sweat, hard work, and meticulousness down to the centimeter. Dozens of red arrow lines covered the map, the entire route the intel team had swept over the past few days. I personally drove the vehicle to check every single one of these marked spots. Nothing. Not even a bird's feather. Afraid I wouldn't believe him, Pei Xiao continued to explain in detail, from the 30-kilometer radius to the outer belt, analyzing every terrain, every area, everything they had seen, and the place is completely devoid of life. 8 days ago, they received my directive. There was an alien army of about 20,000 near the village. Just hearing that was enough to make the faint-hearted wet their pants. If they couldn't find any traces, who knew if they'd be standing right at our gates when we opened them tomorrow morning? I granted special permission to use the Earth Tiger, our strongest recon vehicle, for the team to head out. For the first 3 days, the team barely slept. Aside from hastily eating some dry rations, all their remaining time was spent turning over every meter of dirt and every blade of grass. Pei Xiao was professionally trained, so he understood better than anyone that in this situation, time was life. The seven-man team ran for 4 days and 4 nights straight, using both wheels and feet to draw a map amidst the radioactive dust. The result? Nothing. No 20,000 enemies, no scouts, not a single alien shadow. But what kept the team investigating wasn't because I had spoken with absolute certainty. It was because the normalcy of that place was too abnormal. In that 100-kilometer radius, no aliens was one thing. Normal animals? No. Mutated creatures? Also no. Everything was as silent as a graveyard. On the 5th day, after reporting the results, the team rested for half a day and set out again that very night. This time, it wasn't just the 7 of them. Zhong Qingshu also joined in. The 8 of them began expanding their investigation from the 100 to 200-kilometer belt. Relying on their existing experience, their speed was much faster this time. It only took 3 days and 3 nights to sweep the entire area. In places suspected of ambushes, they even checked tens to hundreds of kilometers deeper. Early yesterday morning, they returned with the exact same result, a big, fat 0. Has this strip of land been checked thoroughly? I pointed at the map. I checked it. Very thoroughly. Pei Xiao nodded firmly. I sat down, frowning, the weight in my heart growing heavier. The intel about 20,000 aliens preparing to attack was something I learned the first time I connected to Koni's status panel. I didn't pay much attention to it then. After all, the current shelter was tough enough, and the defenses solid enough. 2,000 or 3,000 aliens couldn't even make a dent. But the problem lay here. 8 days ago, on a morning when I reconnected to Koni's control panel, I noticed something unusual on the World Channel. Normally, whenever the aliens chatted, no matter how quiet they were, they'd always mention my name a few times, full of fear and wariness. Yet that day, a few races that used to fear me dared to speak loudly and arrogantly. A small change might mean nothing to others, but to my nose, it had a scent. The scent of a storm before it hits. I waited for nearly an hour, gathering all the snippets mentioning me to analyze. And I clearly saw the problem. The aliens were no longer afraid of me. While I wasn't paying attention, they had received some news. News that made them incredibly confident. Right then, I had to take a risk and make contact. As a normal alien, it was nearly impossible to approach the royal families. But under the guise of a Basin alien, things were much easier. I, in the form of Koni, sent a friend request, said a few innocuous things, and finally managed to establish contact with Clark. In that extremely brief conversation, not only did I understand why the aliens stopped fearing me, but I also learned earth-shattering news that even the other aliens didn't know yet. A total of 20,000 aliens had gathered near the basin, preparing to invade. Among them were 3 races with a power score over 1.0. Compared to the Lyman score of 0.003, the power gap was truly terrifying. No matter how gutsy I was, I couldn't just sit still and wait for death. As soon as I agreed with Clark that I would withdraw from the basin within a 200-kilometer radius, I immediately ordered the intel team to sweep the entire area. 2 consecutive recon missions covering the entire 200-kilometer belt. If the result was still no aliens, then Clark had lied. In the spacious meeting room, big enough for over 20 people, I was lost in thought while Pei Xiao reported the entire process again. Gradually, a 3D topographical map formed in the minds of the 3 of us. I knew this basin very well from the time I passed through the ruins of time. The terrain here sloped upward to the south and downward to the north. If there really were 20,000 aliens hiding, there were only 2 most suitable spots. First, about 120 kilometers north of the basin, there was a massive geological rift stretching nearly 200 kilometers. The section near the basin was about 26 meters deep, and further inside, it dropped to 52 meters. Surrounding the rift were rocky hills 10 to 20 meters high, rugged and chaotic. If I wanted to leave the basin for the tundra, I definitely had to pass through this route to avoid crashing into the cliffs. If the aliens guessed my direction right, this was the perfect place for an ambush. Second, about 135 kilometers to the south, there was a giant natural cave. Inside, it was jagged with sharp rocks, and the paths were as twisted as a maze. If the aliens didn't know I was looking for my sister, but thought I was heading for the new continent, That cave was big enough to hold an army of 20,000 and was an ideal spot to intercept me. But unfortunately, under my direction, the intel team had traversed the northern rift and explored half of the southern cave. The result? Not a single alien shadow, no troops, no traces. The two most suspicious locations had been ruled out. The rest of the area offered almost no clues. After nearly 40 minutes of continuous reporting, when Pei Xiao presented the final area, the meeting room fell into a heavy silence. I was deep in thought. Zhong Qingshu was deep in thought. Only Pei Xiao looked full of worry, occasionally glancing out the window as if weighing something. For a veteran scout like him, not finding the enemy usually meant three possibilities. 1. There were no enemies at all. The intel was fake. 2. The enemy was excellent at hiding, and our current capabilities weren't enough to detect them. 3. The enemy was still on their way, so our recon radius wasn't wide enough to reach them. Let's stop arguing about whether there are aliens or not. After a moment of silence, Zhong Qingshu, who always thought things through, spoke up, immediately dismissing the first possibility. There isn't a single sign of life within a 200-kilometer radius of the basin. That in itself is abnormal. Whether there are enemies or not, we have to investigate why everything is so empty. As for whether that alien army has arrived or is on its way, I lean toward the possibility that they've arrived and are in hiding. But I think we were wrong from the start. About the numbers. Hearing that, I immediately sat up straight. Compared to Pei Xiao, who only focused on executing missions, Zhong Qingshu often looked at problems from a different angle. She didn't speak much, but every time she opened her mouth, it made sense. As soon as I heard wrong direction from the start, I narrowed my eyes. I felt a surge of joy that we finally had a breakthrough, but my mind was already racing to analyze it. If those 20,000 aliens weren't dragged into the light before the ocean disaster struck, and they ambushed the basin, even if I wasn't afraid of a fight, as long as the hope was destroyed before setting sail, all plans would collapse. Where did we go wrong? Wrong about the numbers? Or the motive? Or the target? While I was constantly untangling the mess, my eyes swept over the map dotted with markers. My brain automatically compared it with the initial intel from Clark. The alien garrison, the number 20,000 came from his mouth. The secondary evidence was just the unusually arrogant attitude of the aliens on the World Channel. But was it really 20,000? Or at least, had it not reached that number yet? You mean, they're hiding, but their numbers might not be that large yet? The thought flashed, and I immediately remembered the scene where Coney used spatial rifts to summon her clansmen after the battle with the dogmen. Inspiration surged. If they hadn't hidden themselves, Clark couldn't have casually thrown out the number 20,000. The aliens wouldn't have been so excited to the point of cheering if they didn't have solid news in hand. If they failed, the morale of the entire alien faction would collapse instantly. There were three possibilities. They had hidden themselves, but unlike humans, they had ways to survive without eating or drinking, and could hide where naked eyes or equipment were useless. Or they had accumulated battle rewards from various races, and just needed to wait for the right moment to open rifts, summon their clansmen, and launch a massive ambush. Or they couldn't gather and attack until the ocean disaster occurred. Before that, they couldn't. Of the three theories, the third was the least likely. The first two were completely logical. But unfortunately, we didn't have enough information to verify them. Then she closed her notebook, leaving a moment of silence for me to think. Not important. Pei Xiao jumped up, reacting fiercely. What if they appear right in the basin and open rifts to summon 20,000 troops right under our noses? If the numbers, location, and hiding methods are no longer the focus, then what is? Are we supposed to just sit and wait for the enemy to attack our gates, and only discuss where they came from after the battle? I remained silent. Zhong Qingshu smiled faintly, not saying another word. She understood my way of thinking very well after all the time we'd worked together. But Pei Xiao didn't. He didn't have enough trust to keep up with my train of thought. I knew more secrets about the aliens than anyone else in Hope Village. With just a little hint, I could connect everything myself. If the numbers were no longer important, then only two factors remained, motive and target. I pulled the map closer, my eyes sweeping over the important landmarks, muttering to myself. The motive was clear. I was a highly influential figure in the human community. The aliens knew I could change the tide of the battlefield. In the extermination plans of the 5 great royal families, I was definitely one of the priority targets. If they couldn't stop me from reaching the central battlefield, their plans might be ruined. The motive wasn't wrong. The remaining question was, what was their target? In modern warfare, everything from planes and warships to tanks aimed for one characteristic: stealth. Not disappearing, but avoiding being seen by the enemy. In ancient warfare, there was no radar. Back then, evaluating a good general, aside from their tactical skills, the most important thing was guessing. Not blind guessing, but deducing from the enemy's psychology, from their goals. If you could guess what they wanted, you could stay one step ahead. If the 5 royal families' mission was to deal with me, then from the very beginning, when all of Hope Village was fully gathered, a frontal assault was impossible. Even if they thought numbers meant victory, they still had to consider whether I'd unleash a god-killing move like last time. What if I dragged them all down with me? The aliens weren't stupid either. No one wanted to die pointlessly. From that deduction, I quickly reached my first conclusion. Their target wasn't Hope, nor was it the shelter. It was me, the person who could turn the tide. But if their goal wasn't to kill me, then what did they want? I continued to turn the problem over. They wanted to stop me from reaching the center of the disaster. As soon as I said that, Zhong Qingshu immediately smiled. A smile as if she had been waiting for me to say it for a long time. Then she continued, exactly. The target is you. But not to kill, to stop. Whether you live, whether you sail away, whether you take the whole village with you, it doesn't affect their plans at all. As long as you don't set foot where they don't allow, whether you live or die makes no difference. In fact, she chuckled softly, if you announced right now that you weren't going, I bet they'd show up and throw a farewell party for you. The true plan of the aliens was only known to me, Zhong Qingshu, and Coney. Because Pei Xiao was here, Zhong Qingshu only spoke in roundabouts, not directly. Ever since hearing 20,000 troops, everyone had been trapped in old ways of thinking. They forgot that aliens weren't machines, not brainless zombies. They knew how to weigh options, how to calculate gains and losses. Hope Village only had over 150 people. No matter how much they hated me, wasting 20,000 troops just to make a statement was too stupid. And to take revenge because I once killed the divine dog wasn't worth it either. To force 20,000 troops into a suicide mission, the 5 royal families couldn't afford that price. Zhong Qingshu folded the map a few times, revealing only one specific area, the only route leading from the shelter to the outside through the Grand Canyon. The atmosphere in the room instantly brightened. Under the condition that they don't know where you're going, but still want to mobilize 20,000 troops to block your path and force you in the direction they want, let alone the 5 royal families. Even if Zhuge Liang or Sima Yi came back to life, they'd be helpless. So, from beginning to end, their true purpose wasn't to destroy us. They just want to stop us from passing through that road. She took a pen, drew a line from the shelter to the Grand Canyon, and put the pen down. Pei Xiao sat there dumbfounded, like he had just woken up from a dream. His face clearly spelled out 3 questions. Who am I? Where am I? What are you guys talking about? But I was different. I fully understood what Zhong Qingshu meant. The aliens wouldn't attack. As long as I didn't go through that canyon, they wouldn't interfere either. They were like an invisible fence. I didn't need to know where they were. Just knowing they were there was enough. So, if I wanted to find this hidden army before the disaster struck, the method was very simple. I just needed to drive the Earth Tiger straight through that canyon. And they'd reveal themselves, right? Knowledge is power. And when combining modern military systems with classical tactical thinking, everything became surprisingly clear. Exactly. But I don't recommend you do that right now. It's too risky. Without a home field advantage, fighting such a blind battle is very hard to win. If you don't want to see blood spilled. She glanced at Pei Xiao, who was still space traveling, then looked out the window, where all of Hope Village lay peacefully in the evening light. Her meaning was too clear. We could win this battle, but we shouldn't fight it. Even if we won, the price would be too high. I chuckled softly. No. You misunderstood. Who said I was going to lead people into a direct fight? Wouldn't it be easier to lure the snake out of its hole? Not tomorrow. Give me some time before the disaster begins. I'll find out where they're hiding myself. That canyon, not only will I pass through it, I will pass through it right in front of all the aliens, and right in front of all humanity. After saying that, I stood up abruptly. A smile full of confidence and imposing aura spread across my face, so strong that the whole room seemed to vibrate with it. Zhong Qingshu also froze for a moment. On her face was the same bewildered expression Pei Xiao had just worn. I laughed out loud and waved my hand to end the meeting. Stole a heavenly secret. This time, I really stole a heavenly secret. Because I knew exactly where the aliens were, as well as the conditions for them to reveal themselves. With this steal heavenly secret skill, no matter how flawlessly they hid themselves, as long as I entered the talisman world and headed straight for the Grand Canyon, all their camouflage would be torn away, revealing their true forms. The maximum speed of the Hope was 31 knots, equivalent to about 60 kilometers per hour. The Grand Canyon was 120 kilometers north of the basin. It would only take 2 hours to get there, even without using the charge skill. If I factored in the ocean flooding in, without needing to dodge obstacles, just going straight, 3 hours would be enough to enter the canyon and even cross more than half of it. According to the surveyed topographical map, if the aliens ambushed in the canyon, they only had 2 chances. First, right at the entrance. The terrain here was the most jagged, making it easy to set traps and hard for me to change direction. But the flaw was obvious. I'd definitely be on high alert right as I entered, so an ambush here would easily miss. Second, a spot 72 kilometers from the entrance. Both sides were rocky mountains, forming a massive pocket. If I drove the ship too fast, the hull could easily run aground on the rocky peaks, making this the most ideal place for an ambush. Once I passed that section, even if I didn't continue through the canyon, as long as I carefully navigated the outer perimeter, I could still head north. By then, if the aliens wanted a sneak attack, it would only be a dream. So, in 3 simulations, as long as I managed to get the Hope into that exact spot once, I would find the aliens' hiding place. No need for the intel team to brave the wind and rain anymore. But, what about the 20,000? There's nothing there. Trust me, they can't escape. Seeing Pei Xiao wanting to speak but stopping, and then looking at Zhong Qingshu's adorably bewildered face, I chuckled and casually sent them both off the ship. 9 hours, 3 simulations. If I still couldn't drive the Hope into the canyon in that time, then we wouldn't even need the aliens to attack. We'd die on our own. But if I succeeded, I could wipe them out before the disaster even happened. Or, relying on the information gap, ambush them right when the natural disaster struck. I had to start the simulation experiment soon. The ship still hadn't been fully tested, and whether it could float when the ocean flooded in was still a question mark. A day delayed was another risk. There were only 7 days left before the disaster, and I was certain of one thing: the aliens wouldn't attack. Watching their silhouettes fade away, I stood alone on the ship and pumped my fist in excitement. I had been waiting for this sailing day for nearly a month. For the past half-month, I had to open the game control panel every morning to check Su Chan's status, reassure myself, and then get back to work. But now it was different. As long as I finished installing the engine and tweaked the final part of the autopilot system tonight, I could start the real test. Whether it was a dragon or a snake, I'd know once I tested it. I walked quickly to the bridge on the first floor and flipped the switch in the safe. A narrow gap, just big enough for a person to slip through, instantly opened in the corner of the bridge. This was the area I personally designed as a private escape route, leading straight down to the bottom deck, the engine room. And if you asked where the thickest steel armor on the ship was, it was right here. Even if a nuclear bomb went off outside, 3 meters of steel was enough for me to survive, provided I wasn't at the epicenter. Once hiding in here, I wouldn't be trapped in an iron cage, as long as I ensured there was no secondary explosion. Pressing the emergency button in the engine room would turn this entire area into a mini submarine. Thanks to the matter conversion engine and small propellers, it could leave the battlefield immediately. Though I knew I shouldn't jinx it, I hoped I'd never have to use this thing in my life. If I lost the Hope, my strength would drop by at least 90%. I climbed down the iron ladder, thinking as I went. The sea wasn't like land. Even if the hull was half a meter thick, I still couldn't be completely at ease. As a true landlubber, I always held a certain reverence for the ocean. But that feeling vanished the moment I set foot in the engine room. Down here, there was an unbelievable sense of security. The entire wiring system had been completed exactly according to the blueprints. Like a modular shipyard, the ship possessed black tech so advanced that even hearing about it would confuse an ordinary person. The clearest example, the two pipes in the engine room. The first pipe was pitch black, with a lightning bolt symbol carved on top. Inside were rows of energy conduits, protected by the ship's steel hull, absolutely safe. Even if the ship sank, the electricity would keep running until the very last moment. The second pipe was ocean blue, its end flush with the floor, extending all the way to the bottom of the ship. This pipe was dedicated to sucking in seawater, providing free fuel for the matter conversion engine. Between the two pipes was a 3-square-meter empty space where the engine would be placed. The internal/external engine I got from the female lineman before was too small. Enlarging it did increase its power, but the energy consumption increased accordingly. I hoped this engine wouldn't disappoint me. The engine could only be used after being fixed in place, and once placed, moving it would cost 2,000 disaster points. So, from the time I got it until now, I hadn't dared to test it. I was completely clueless about its seawater conversion efficiency. So, as I placed the engine down, all that was left in me was a frantic desire and expectation for this futuristic black tech monster. I looked at the empty space in the middle of the room and focused my mind. The storage space slowly opened. Among the array of items, the most prominent was a machine block as big as a cabinet. The Level 2 Civilian Total Matter Conversion Engine, rare, taking up exactly 1 cubic meter. I gently controlled it with my mind, bringing the engine out. When my thought completed, the machine block was sitting neatly in the engine room. Immediately after, a series of system notifications rang out. Note: detected that the current vehicle has a rarity level. After installing the engine, there is a small probability of upgrading the vehicle's rarity. Note: detected that the vehicle belongs to the marine vessel category, with a scale larger than micro. Highly compatible with the engine. There is a large probability of generating special attributes. Note: detected that the vehicle uses semi-modular technology. After installation, the engine's energy conversion efficiency will slightly increase. Note: detected Level 2 Civilian Total Matter Conversion Engine, rare. It has been placed in the correct vehicle and meets the binding conditions. Do you wish to bind? Warning: once bound, removing it will cost 20,000 disaster points and has a small probability of reducing the engine's durability. I didn't expect there to be a synergy effect where 1 + 1 is greater than 2. Looking at the string of notifications, my initial anxiety instantly turned into excitement. In any vehicle, the engine is always the soul. Just like with cars, when talking about performance, everyone immediately asks, 6 cylinders? What kind of sports car is this? 8 cylinders? Not bad, but that's just the entry level. 12 cylinders? Sorry, in front of my 16 cylinders, you're still just ordinary. Warships were the same. The engine was just as important as the weapons. And right now, possessing an engine at the top of the hierarchy, I didn't hesitate anymore and directly chose to confirm the binding. Like thunder in a clear sky, the moment my thought landed, an invisible surge of energy exploded in the engine room. The engine block, originally only the size of a box, suddenly began to transform in an extremely sci-fi manner. Blue light spread out like ocean waves. The hard outer shell cracked open, revealing the core expanding like a sponge meeting water. As if prepared for this, I quickly pulled the two pipes back, creating more space for it to continue transforming. 3.5 by 3.5 meters. 4 by 4. 4.5 by 4.5. 5 by 5 meters. Watching the engine grow larger and larger, taking up nearly half the engine room, I was finally completely at ease about its power supply capabilities. When building the Hope, an 80-meter ship, most villagers believed in it. But a few military enthusiast keyboard warriors on the forums doubted it. No smokestacks, no pressure cabins, no boilers. So it runs on faith? Is it a sailboat? Honestly, even I was worried, until I saw this massive engine, 6 meters long, nearly 6 meters wide, and 4 meters tall, with my own eyes. For an 80-meter ship, if it only used the energy produced in the shelter, 80 or 90 liters of diesel a day wouldn't be enough for a single voyage. Even pooling a whole year's worth might only run it for a month. But now, Looking at the engine taking up almost the entire room, all my worries about energy vanished like clouds. The rest was just looking forward to the Hope's final stats. Now, only the control system and electrical connections were left. Tomorrow morning? Tonight. I had to finish installing the system to see just how powerful the Hope, the crystallization of almost all our resources and effort, truly was. As I tried plugging the two giant pipes into the connection ports, I imagined the ship crashing through waves and charging out to sea. Just imagining it made my whole body tremble with excitement. I needed the Hope, and the villagers needed the Hope. This ship didn't just carry the expectations of hundreds of people, it was also my own dream for the future. I climbed back up the stairs, my steps noticeably firmer. Having made it this far, the darkest days were finally about to end. The autopilot system only needed its processing logic finished. If I skipped the ethics and morality layer, it would be done before 6 p.m. today. After that, I just needed to mount the weapons on the joints, and the first phase of testing could begin. Oh right, I should also move the cargo onto the ship. Otherwise, entering the talisman world with the Hope as just an empty shell would be a waste. Actually, tweaking the autopilot system wasn't hard. Most of the source code I used was taken from fully developed ship control systems on Earth. I just needed to modify it to fit the Hope's unique structure. The part that needed modification was only 10%. With my work speed over the past few days, I was confident I could finish it in half a day. Then I'd debug it in the simulation. If it ran smoothly, I'd install it straight onto the ship, completing Phase 2, fine-tuning and finalizing. As for the current firepower system, since we didn't have compatible missiles or ballistics yet, the vertical launch modules were still just decorations. But the remaining 18 machine gun mounts were fully complete. I just needed to mount the guns and connect them to the central control system, and they'd be ready to use. Thinking of that, I securely locked all the equipment and closed all the cabin doors, leaving only one access way to the cargo hold. I sent Chun Shin a message, telling him to start loading the first batch of supplies onto the ship, then quickly dashed down the wooden stairs back to the shelter. On the third floor of the shelter, the computer desk I had custom-built over 10 days ago was already speckled with grease stains. But for a workaholic like me, that was nothing. I wiped the desk clean and turned on the computer. The compiler software written by the genius student from Yen country was very user-friendly, with a clean interface and built-in simulation. I chugged a glass of energy water, and my condition instantly returned to its peak. The screen started running code as smoothly as music. Now, the most important part was the navigation judgment system. In large ships, over 90% of autopilot data comes from radar. The radar feeds back environmental information, the system analyzes it, and then automatically decides to speed up, slow down, or change direction. If the data is absolutely accurate, the safety level is even higher than human control. But unfortunately, the Hope wasn't fully equipped. The whole ship only had 5 radars. The central radar was for fire control. Although it could double as an environmental scanner during combat, it would prioritize combat targets. At that time, the accuracy of environmental data would drop sharply. If I insisted on relying on environmental data from the radar to steer the ship, I knew for sure it would easily lead to misjudgments. And once a mistake was made, the ensuing consequences would be unimaginable. The obstacle avoidance radars placed at the bow, stern, and both sides of the ship were even less reliable. That type of radar was no different from a car's backup radar. It only provided partial support. Driving a car while only looking at the backup radar was basically a death wish. Therefore, in the logic processing section, I had to take a risk and use something no warship had ever dared to use: real-time image analysis. 3 ultra-high-definition cameras previously installed in the shipyard. After the hull was finished, I took 2 off and mounted them on the bow and stern of the Hope. Thanks to the village's purchasing department keeping an eye out for days, I managed to gather 4 more low-quality surveillance cameras. Although the resolution was low, mounting them on the sides of the hull was acceptable. With 6 camera eyes covering the entire hull, the image analysis system accounted for 75% of the weight in the autopilot system. Radar was reduced to 20%. The remaining 5% I handed over entirely to the almighty robot, which had been upgraded twice. This was a bold move. So bold that even if Earth's technology advanced another 10 or 20 years, No one would dare hand over almost full control of a warship to an autopilot system. But I did it. And the more I worked, the more amazed I became. Not only were there no glitches, but everything ran unbelievably smoothly. Whether I fed it simulated images or real data to test. Across all 179 simulations, the coordination between the robot and the controller didn't pose any threat to the Hope. An almost unimaginable result. The robot's judgment capabilities combined with the collected data seemed to have created a perfect chemical reaction. Across all 179 simulations, the coordination between the mech arms and the control system posed absolutely no threat to the Hope. An almost unimaginable result. The judgment of the mech arms combined with the collected data seems to have created a perfect chemical reaction. I'm not even sure if this is good news or bad news. But if it runs as smoothly on the actual ship as it did in the simulation, then I've just laid the first brick for the future of human automated navigation. Moral avoidance protocols? In a post-apocalyptic ocean, there's no need for that. The Hope cannot be put in danger. Even if it means facing unpredictable consequences, I can't allow a single mistake. Ever since I decided to completely scrap the moral judgment module, my coding speed has skyrocketed. My fingers danced across the keyboard. The clacking echoed rapidly, like a race against time. Up on the second floor, the four little ones weren't idle either. For this journey, all four of them had to board the ship as the very first crew members of the Hope. The mission isn't just to pick up my sister. We also have to beat everyone else to find the sea god. Because of that, I made a decision 10 days ago. I absolutely will not bring the villagers along, not even Zhongqing Shu. Everyone must stay at Iron Rock Mountain and wait for my return. As for the Sphinx medic, since her loyalty is still unverified, I didn't give her any authority or tasks. Treating her as a mobile alien stat sheet is enough. On the other hand, the four little ones each have their own heavy responsibilities. In the second floor plantation room, under the sunlight by the window, Muir was reading the chief mate's manual I compiled. Sometimes he frowned in confusion, and other times he let out happy little grunts. For a Thunder Bear warrior, steering a massive ship is definitely beyond his capabilities. But thanks to drinking energy water for so long, his intelligence has spiked. Plus, I assigned him a role that perfectly fits his personality, so things are going surprisingly smoothly. As the chief mate, Muir doesn't need to steer the ship. He's in charge of the second most important aspect, combat. All firepower systems are temporarily under his command. From assigning special ops tasks and combat batteries to selecting attack targets, he calls the shots. Due to the lack of manpower, Muir also doubles as the assistant mechanical engineer, conducting routine checks on the electrical and mechanical systems alongside the mech arms. That manual is packed with knowledge, and I edited it into simple, everyday language. He learns a bit slow, but as long as he puts in the effort, he'll get it. Oreo, meanwhile, takes on the role of second mate. In front of him is the reconnaissance manual. Thanks to his innate skills and the fact that he can't speak, Oreo's duties revolve entirely around scouting and inspecting the hull. Normally, these two tasks would require 20 to 50 people, but the mech arms save a massive amount of manpower. As for Xiaohuahua and Dahuahua, their tasks are much simpler, managing supplies. They take care of all the crops transferred onto the ship, ensuring a fresh food supply. All four of them have their own jobs. Because of this, the shelter, the starting point of my dream, is temporarily unusually quiet. The training room, once bustling every morning, is now covered in a thin layer of dust. The stove hasn't been lit in over 10 days. Even the large planting frames haven't been seeded with anything new. With the disaster approaching, no one has time for leisure. The second floor is now filled only with the bubbling of energy water, the rustling of pages, and the soft grunts of the four little ones. Outside, after receiving my message, the villagers, under Chun Shin's direction, have finished preparing the first batch of cargo to load onto the ship. The continuous steel production and the Phase 3 construction of Hope Village over the past few days have consumed a massive amount of basic materials. Therefore, after evaluating the ship's cargo capacity and the development needs in the new continent, I heavily stocked up on extra materials as a reserve. Copper and iron are still the main focus, but wood, stone, aluminum, grease, and electronic components have all been gathered as well. Prices are cheap right now, So hoarding early is a smart move. Once we reach the new continent, we won't have to worry about material shortages during the initial territory construction phase. Very quickly, the first batch of cargo was loaded onto the ship. Meanwhile, I sat on the third floor, finishing the final lines of code. All edits are done. The compiler shows no errors, so I can run a simulation at any time. As long as it runs smoothly without any logic bugs, I can install it directly onto the ship for a live test. With the heavenly secret theft in my hands, I have enough capital to make mistakes. There's no need to walk on eggshells like modern humans do. Everything is ready. All we need now is the east wind. Looking at the fully packaged program, I loaded it into the simulation and began the final series of tests. Leaning back in my chair, I gently closed my eyes to rest, recovering my energy after hours of nonstop coding. The first test focused on the launch capability and the ship's movement status once it hit the ocean. According to the calculation model, it's highly unlikely we'll encounter any major issues. But I can't rule out surprises. Since this is a simulation in the talisman world, everyone besides me, the four little ones and the villagers, is masked by the system. They absolutely cannot participate. If any situation arises, I have to handle it myself and record every single detail. So, keeping my mind steady is absolutely crucial. Fortunately, the test didn't take long. Only about an hour and a half. Thanks to drinking some energy water to restore my stamina, by the time the beeping signaled completion, I was back in peak condition. Perfect. All three simulation runs passed flawlessly. Tonight is the night I activate the heavenly secret theft for a live combat test on the Hope. Since I don't have ideal conditions to test the ship, I'm forced to compensate by applying an ultra-cautious 3-step inspection model during the northbound journey. I completely cut off the entertainment systems, running only the automated control system. With the current server configuration, during continuous load tests, the load sometimes exceeded the 60% mark, but the overall performance maintained an astonishing level of stability. The concurrent processing chart under simulated enemy conditions also met the standard. The Hope can adjust its course and dodge obstacles incredibly fast. Most importantly, the error rate when encountering extreme control situations remained an absolute zero. Not a single glitch. Nodding in satisfaction, I jotted down all the variables from the simulation into my notebook, then powered down and uninstalled the entire server. Over 10 days of grueling work, all for this very moment. But looking at the empty desk after storing the server in my inventory, I still couldn't help but feel a bit uneasy. In the eyes of others, I'm like an omnipotent super soldier. I can shoot, survive in the wild, fix ships, code. I can do it all. But only I know that this is my first time steering a ship, and it's an 80-meter-long destroyer, no less. If I went back to Earth and told this story, even my dad would think I was full of crap. Thinking about my old man, who used to brag just because he got to touch a tank and a helicopter. Meanwhile, the moment I lay my hands on something, I have to pilot an entire warship. I chuckled, the anxiety in my heart easing a bit. Heading up to the second floor, the cooks had already brought dinner. But strangely, none of the four little ones were as ravenous as usual today. All four of them were still sitting under the lamp, intently reading the manuals I compiled. The day of departure is imminent. I'm not the only one feeling the pressure. The little ones also clearly understand the heavy burden on their shoulders. For Muir and Oreo, this mission is heavier than any before. Not wanting to disturb them, I opened the thermos, took out my portion of food, and quietly ate at the dusty table that hadn't been used in ages. This is the final dinner before we set sail. I didn't eat much. 2 cabbage and tofu steamed buns, and about 3 ounces of beef, plus a bowl of thin porridge. Yet after finishing, I felt completely stuffed. The effects of stress, I know it all too well. But as I put the thermos away, only one word remained in my eyes: forward. What's there to be afraid of? If the ship can't run tonight, even if I have to burn through my survival points, I'll drag it out to sea. If I don't have enough points, then I'll risk my own life. Even if the alien races show their faces, am I really going to let these damn things drive me to my death while I'm still breathing? After hyping myself up a bit, I double-checked all the necessary gear, stored it in my inventory, locked the shelter door, and stepped outside. The sky in the wasteland darkens very quickly. By 6:30, the night had already begun to fall. In the past few days, the floodlights at the shipyard would be blazing, But ever since the Hope was completed, all the lights had been completely shut off. From a distance, the moment he saw me, Chen Shun, who had been waiting, immediately ran over to report on the cargo loading status. The first batch of goods wasn't anything precious. Even the food was just a few jars of pickled cabbage that wouldn't spoil easily. Very good, neat, and orderly. Hope Village needs exactly this kind of spirit. After praising him, I immediately gave him his orders. Tonight, I have an extremely important task for you. Just say the word, Brother Sue. From 7 p.m. onwards, lock down a 2-kilometer radius around the Hope. Without my orders, no one is allowed to enter. Mobilize the entire militia. This is not a drill. I need a full-scale armed lockdown. Seeing my serious expression and hearing the killing intent in my voice, Chun Shin froze, as if he had guessed something. Brother Sue, could it be that tonight is? That's right. This is the most crucial moment for Hope Village. I don't want anyone disturbing me. Hearing his suspicions confirmed, Chun Shun, who had been mentally preparing for this for over 10 days, didn't say another word. He stood up straight, gave a standard salute, pulled a pistol from his inventory, and sprinted toward the village. The Hope is about to be tested. This isn't just important to me. It concerns the lives of over 100 people. Lately, the villagers have been working normally on the surface, but at night, many lose sleep just thinking about the ship. Even the management team is the same. Everyone is terrified that when we actually set sail, the Hope might malfunction. Even though Chen Shun had simulated hundreds of scenarios in his head, hearing me confirm it in person still made his heart tremble with excitement. He knew that if the test succeeded, humanity's future in the upcoming ocean disaster would be forever changed. And he knew even better that if I could single-handedly build a destroyer, following me to the very end was the smartest choice of his life. Brother Sue, you will definitely succeed. Even though his lungs felt like they were going to explode and his body struggled from oxygen deprivation, Chun Shun didn't stop running, because he believed I would succeed. As for me, I was already sitting at the bow of the ship, waiting for the sun to completely dip below the horizon before opening the cockpit door and sitting down. Right now, the Hope hasn't been powered up. To get it running, it has to be connected to the matter conversion engine for a continuous power supply. I summoned a mech arm and had it shine a light so I could install the server in the dark. Once done, I pressed the button to open the 3-tier mechanism leading down to the engine room. The iron plate slowly shifted. I checked that the main switch was still off, then climbed down the iron ladder, heading straight into the engine room. Currently, the seawater intake pipes can't function because the ocean hasn't arrived yet. The only way to start the engine right now is to load fuel manually. After thinking for a moment, I took out a 50-liter barrel of diesel, poured it into the intake chamber, and closed it. I then tried pressing the start button on the matter conversion engine. Sure enough, a modular control panel slowly slid out from the side. This panel was even bigger than the oil well's control panel, probably the size of a 30-inch TV. Perfect. Going by the logic that bigger is better, I couldn't hide my smile looking at the massive panel in front of me. But my joy was short-lived. My face instantly darkened when I saw the displayed data. 50 liters of diesel was enough to start the engine, but it would only last for 1 minute and 20 seconds. This kind of consumption was a bottomless pit. If I couldn't use seawater and had to rely on diesel, I wouldn't have enough fuel to set sail even if I sold myself. Well then, oil is a no-go. Let's try something else. I turned off the control panel, reopened the intake chamber, and started testing every type of material in my inventory. 1 kilogram of iron equals 1.8 seconds. 1 kilogram of copper equals 2.2 seconds. It topped the chart, but it's still a reject. 1 kilogram of wood is 0.9 seconds. 1 kilogram of aluminum is 1.1 seconds. Useless. Wheat is 0.3 seconds. Pathetic. 1 kilogram of water is 0.65 seconds. Keep that one in mind. After testing dozens of materials, copper was still the strongest, but even that was only 2.2 seconds per kilogram. 1,000 units of copper would only run it for a little over 30 minutes. Too expensive. Good lord, this is literally burning money. I scrapped all the test materials and only kept water. 0.65 seconds per kilogram is a pretty decent number. According to my calculations, the Hope's mid-tier pump can draw in 65 tons of water per hour. That's roughly 18 kilograms per second. That provides 11.7 seconds of consumption for every second of operation. More than enough to feed the engine. But I still have a trump card. This time, I didn't test another random material. I took out the most precious thing in the shelter. Energy water. After its second upgrade, this water possessed capabilities far beyond imagination. I didn't even need to test it to know it would definitely be number one. It felt like a waste, but I had to try. I poured 1 liter of energy water into the intake chamber, closed the lid, and opened the control panel. The numbers on the board changed terrifyingly. With other materials, the runtime was measured in seconds. But this time, the number that popped up was an H. A full 1.8 hours. 1 liter could run it for an hour and 48 minutes. That means I only need about 13 liters a day to operate the entire ship. Even though it's overwhelmingly powerful, it's still not as economical as seawater. I can't carry an infinite amount of energy water. Every liter used is a liter gone forever. This is a strategic resource to be used only in emergencies. 99% of the time, the main power source still has to be seawater. But right now, I have enough power for a long run. So, let's start the test. I pressed the start button. A deep, low hum echoed from the engine, like a wild beast awakening at the bottom of the ship. Without hesitation, I climbed up to the first floor and entered the cockpit. The engine needs 3 minutes to fully start up. In 3 minutes, the Hope's entire system will be powered. Switching to standby mode, all I have to do is pull the main breaker, and this massive destroyer will awaken. 1 minute. 2 minutes. Sitting in the cockpit, I watched the countdown timer and listened to the engine growing louder by the second. For some reason, my heart was unusually calm. 90,000 units of iron. 30,000 units of copper. High-strength magnetic steel. For mech arms working nonstop. Step by step, from its inception to its completion, I witnessed it all with my own eyes. All my blood, sweat, and tears were poured into this. There is no reason for it to fail. Hope, ignite. I closed my eyes, waiting for the exact moment. When the engine's roar shifted into a steady rhythm, I opened my eyes, my gaze brimming with absolute confidence. I yanked the main power lever. An earth-shattering rumble echoed out, not from the hull, but from the ground. The entire support structure beneath the ship groaned and cracked as if it were about to snap in half, buckling under the terrifying weight. The sky had turned pitch black, the last sliver of light on the horizon fading away. But in the darkness, the Hope came alive. The entire ship shuddered in waves, like a giant beast shedding its skin. The 100+ villagers standing around were stunned into silence. A second ago, they were holding torches, their eyes bloodshot with determination. They knew tonight had to be a success. Failure was not an option. A second later, the ground trembled violently, and the sky lit up once more. They turned their heads. That sight would stay with them for the rest of their lives. The Hope was glowing. Like a colossal monster prostrating on the earth, the hull emitted a dim, deep purple glow that wasn't blinding. At the bow, where the flag of Hope was planted, specks of orange light gathered. At first, they were faint, as if about to extinguish. But a breath later, that orange light flared up brilliantly. The Hope had turned orange. An ultra-rare grade that only epic tier equipment in games possessed. Purple glow, orange leap. The villagers who didn't understand cheered in pure joy, but the management team looked as if they had just seen a ghost. 12 days ago, they had collected loot dropped by the bandits from the shelter. A black pot, a folding chair, and an everlasting lamp. When appraised, the special glow of those items was enough to dazzle them. But now, the 80-meter-long Hope was radiating a brilliant orange light across its entire hull. This could only mean one thing. Epic grade. A crazy thought instantly struck everyone's minds. Su Chin actually built an epic grade ship with his own hands. What the hell? How does this make any sense? People looked at each other, their eyes filled with absolute bewilderment. Chi Xian looked like he'd lost his compass. Pei Xiao stared at the world with eyes that no longer understood reality. Chun Shun's entire body practically screamed the words, impossible. Meanwhile, Zhong Qingshu stood in the corner, muttering like a sleepwalker. Am I dreaming? Epic grade. That concept was so insane, it was unbelievable. Sure, in this world, there were incredibly lucky people who might pick up an epic grade item or two. But crafting an epic grade item yourself? Let alone right now, Even half a year or a year from now, it wasn't guaranteed anyone could do it. Not to mention, this was an 80-meter-long ship. If it had reached the epic grade, just how terrifying would its special abilities be? Just thinking about it was enough to give them goosebumps. But before they could even digest the shock of that brilliant orange glow, under the expectant gazes of the crowd, the orange light on every steel plate didn't fade. Instead, it burned even more fiercely. The hope looked like it was bathing in a sea of orange fire. The flames rolled, the light boiled. Every time the flames flared, the orange glow intensified by a notch. Every time the ground trembled, the light enveloping the hull danced once more. Once, twice, 3 times. Right as the flames flared for the 3rd time, the very villager who had first spotted the light screamed, "Look! It's turning gold. It's really turning gold. Our hope is turning gold. Holy shit. Is this the legendary gold grade? Did Suchin just open a god-tier pack?" Boom. The crowd of villagers, who had been trying to keep their cool, suddenly erupted like a chaotic marketplace. The militia, who had just been holding their strict formations, heard the words legendary gold and instantly surged forward. They shoved each other just to witness a sight that might only happen once in a lifetime. No one could stop them. The crowd grew denser, their cheers ringing out like it was a festival. The militiamen running back from afar thought they were hearing things. When they looked up, they froze in their tracks. It wasn't just the villagers. The management team was even more shell-shocked. Chen Shun, usually so cold and composed, stood frozen like a stone statue. Pei Xiao had collapsed onto the ground, his whole body trembling as if having a seizure. Qi Xian leaned entirely on the person behind him, his legs like jelly. Even Wu Feiguang, the calmest and most serious of them all, slumped to the ground, muttering like he was possessed. Damn. If orange is epic, then gold can only be legendary. Outside, it was as chaotic as a festival. But me? Sitting in the first-floor cockpit, I had no idea what was going on. Instead, I was being mentally tortured by the system. The moment I pulled the main switch, the game instantly went crazy. Notifications flooded in, flashing so wildly it looked like a system glitch. Before I could even read one, the system panel popped up on its own, blinking incessantly. It felt like I had just triggered some massive mechanism. Since getting the system, I had never seen it react this violently. Luckily, I was used to this. I sat on the floor, letting the game blow its whistles in my head. After making sure the hull wasn't malfunctioning, I stopped worrying and just waited for the notifications to end. And it was true. Sitting inside the ship, I couldn't see the light outside. I knew the ship had reached epic grade, but to what exact extent? I could only wait for the heavens to judge. Fortunately, after what felt like a century, the notifications finally stopped. The information panel froze so I could read it. Holy crap. 34 notifications, all at once. That was even more than when I killed the fake God Heavenly Hound. Looking at this, it's definitely epic. I just hope this hope doesn't disappoint me. As the control panel stopped vibrating and the system chimes faded, I couldn't suppress the excitement bubbling in my chest. With a thought, the system logs poured out line by line like a flood. System notification chain. Log. Detected players Su Mo successfully crafting the Tier 3 Destroyer blueprint. Grade. Rare. Log. Tier 3 Destroyer construction complete. Log. Detected application of advanced technology. Added 2 attribute lines. Log. Error. Flood. Log. Detected rare grade vehicle containing epic grade attributes. Calibrating. Log. Current grade. Epic. Log. Crafted beyond tier limits. Gained 1 additional attribute. Log. Broke technological limits. Gained Title 1. Log. Participation rate reached 93%. Activated 1 additional epic attribute. Log. Error. Log. Met conditions for legendary promotion. Upgrading. Log. Current grade. Pseudo-legendary. Log. Gained 1 additional high-tier normal gacha pull. 34 notifications poured out like a storm. When the words pseudo-legendary appeared, no matter how much I had tempered myself, I still roared. Motherfucker. Pseudo-legendary. I crafted a pseudo-legendary vehicle. Ah! Since I was the only one sitting in the ship, I screamed my lungs out. Every shout released the immense pressure I had been bottling up for days. No one knew. No one understood. If this ship had failed, I would have collapsed right then and there. During these 10 days that the villagers thought were a breeze, I had lived in the bunker under a pressure that could crush a normal person. The fate of humanity, my sister's survival, the pressure from the game, layer upon layer, it all weighed on my shoulders. I used to think someone else would hold up the sky for me. But now, I was the one holding up the sky. An ordinary guy from Earth had to endure so much pain to get to this point. But now, the pseudo-legendary Hope was born. Carrying all my blood, sweat, and tears, it had arrived. I closed all the notifications, hid the high-tier gacha panel, and immediately saw a brand new function pop up on the control panel. Vehicles sat right alongside crafting, trading, and chat. Just looking at its placement, I knew this was absolutely no ordinary feature. I used my mind to open the tab. Instantly, a completely new interface popped up. In the center, there was only a single, sparkling point of light, add vehicle to bind. I clicked to open the binding menu, expecting to see both Earth Tiger and King Kong. But completely defying my expectations, there was only one name glowing in fiery red gold, Tier 3 Destroyer, pseudo-legendary. Oh ho, turns out this feature discriminates by tier. My initial excitement settled down, and I gradually calmed myself. It's fine. It makes sense that Earth Tiger and King Kong can't be bound yet. When we reach the new continent, I'll craft epic versions for them. Or, if things go smoothly, I'll just make them legendary to keep everyone happy. No need to rush. The most important thing right now is naming it. I clicked into the binding menu, and the familiar naming interface popped up. I didn't even have to think, because I had kept this name in my heart for a long time. The moment the thought arose, the word appeared like flying dragons and dancing phoenixes. Hope. A gentle wave of light rippled out like water. The interface reset, and when it opened again, the Hope was sitting neatly in the vehicle's list, ready for me to check its detailed stats. It's pseudo-legendary. I hope its stats are as badass as its rank. Ideally, when I run into the sea god later, I can just ram it once and send it tumbling into the ocean. People often lose confidence not because they're incompetent, but because their efforts are invalidated. In modern times, examples of trying hard and getting nothing are actually incredibly rare. But the media constantly blows them out of proportion with clickbait titles, making people believe that effort equals hopelessness. Because of this, aside from a very few with extraordinary willpower, most gradually lose faith in themselves. But thankfully, the Hope, glowing red gold like a fire in the dark, completely shattered any remaining doubts in me when its stat panel opened. Tier 3 Destroyer, Hope. Grade, pseudo-legendary. Description: every epic will eventually reach its final chapter, but every legend carved into stone will live on in eternal memory. On the outside, this is just an ordinary destroyer. But inside, it holds a power that could make even the gods tremble. If you are a friend of its captain, this red gold flag will be a guiding beacon in the dark night. But if you are an enemy, pray to the heavens that you can run fast enough. Base stats: length, 84.3 m. Beam, 12.9 m. Height, 21 meters. Draft, 4.8 m. Max displacement, 6,900 tons. Durability, 30,000/30,000. Cruising speed, 33 knots, approximate 61 kilometers per hour. Max speed, 45 knots, approximate 83 kilometers per hour. Special equipment: total material conversion engine, civilian tier 2. Vertical missile launch module D3. Flag of Hope. Damage capability, 0.24. Currently can only ram straight ahead. Operating range, infinite. Special skills: 1. Charge, rare active. Consume 5% durability to activate charge for 5 minutes. Speed increases to 55 knots. Colliding with the first target triggers a compressed energy explosion. 1 use/day. Max charges, 3. Cooldown, 24 hours. 2. Spiked armor, rare, passive when attacked. The hull generates random frequency energy reactions. Reduces damage slightly and has a small chance to reflect damage. 3. Wave breaker, rare, passive. Perfect aerodynamic hull. Calm seas, speed plus 5%. Rough seas, speed increases up to 50%. 4. Comfort, rare, passive. Thick armor, and stable center of gravity. Waves under level 3, no swaying. Waves level 3 to 12, swaying reduced by 50%. 5. Potential, epic, passive. Upgrading the ship will not erase current attributes. 6. Regeneration, epic, passive at sea, receives healing from seawater. Recovers 5% durability daily. Max accumulation, 30%. Instantly recovers 9,000 durability when activated. 7. Hope, pseudo-legendary, passive. Hope can serve as a flagship. When activation conditions are met, all ships in the fleet will receive plus 30% of Hope's attributes. Activation conditions, unknown. My assessment. 7 special skills, 4 rare, 2 epic, 1 pseudo-legendary. Every single line was worth a dream. It was a pity that only charge was an active skill. But the passive lineup was absolutely top tier. Especially regeneration, a skill that could make enemies despair just by reading its description. Wavebreaker was also terrifying. A percentage-based effect scales with the ship's tier. For example, in rough seas, the cruising speed would be 50 knots, and the max speed would be 67 knots, 120 kilometers per hour. Imagine this, amidst a stormy sea with towering waves and howling winds. Suddenly, an 80-meter-long warship, weighing nearly 7,000 tons and clad in half a meter of steel, blasts past you at 120 kilometers per hour. That scene wouldn't just be cool, it would be absolutely fire. I couldn't even wipe the grin spreading across my face. Back in the day, a rare-grade ship only had 2,500 durability. Now, 30,000. Trying to drill through this ship from the outside? Without special tech, you could drill until your next life and still not breach half an inch of steel. I placed my hand on the steel plating near the cockpit and knocked lightly. From the engine and armor to combat capability and disaster resistance. All the way to its array of special skills, the Hope had truly touched the pinnacle of this current world. Let alone others trying to surpass me. Even I wasn't sure I could replicate this miracle without the game's buffs. But this perfect ship still had one fatal flaw: firepower. Going down the construction route, I had poured all my survival points, time, and energy into the foundation and hull. As a result, weapons had been completely neglected since the battle where we wiped out the kobolds. Before, we had machine guns and some explosives. Now, nearly a month later, it was exactly the same. This would definitely be a massive disadvantage out at sea. Luckily, once we set sail, the construction aspect could be temporarily paused. I need to prioritize upgrading the shelter to level 5 to craft machine tools and unlock RPGs and vertical missile modules. If possible, I'll dump my survival points heavily into the missile tech tree. The Hope must have long-range strike capabilities spanning hundreds of kilometers. As I thought about it, I glanced at the ship's damage stat, which was still pitifully low. Because the missile module couldn't be activated yet, according to the old blueprint, the Hope only had a total of 18 firepower points. Bow, 4, stern, 4, port and starboard, an 80mm machine gun mounted in a protective alcove every 10 meters. This layout was only a temporary fix. In the long run, it all had to be replaced, especially the caliber. How could 80mm guns fight on the open ocean? Now that the Hope was complete, my mind grew clearer. After ensuring there were no issues with any of the stats, I closed the hatch leading down to the engine room and opened the main door on the first floor. I had to step outside. Tonight, there was only one goal: testing the Hope's mobility. Firepower wasn't the priority. Upgrading 4 robots to special ops and deploying them to the east, south, west, and north would be enough to simulate combat. I ordered the robots to mount 4 machine guns in fixed positions, then summoned 3 normal robots and 1 old special ops robot. Total cost, 1,440 survival points. A blue light enveloped the 3 ordinary robots. In the blink of an eye, they transformed. Their eyes grew sharp and clear, as if a soul had just been breathed into them. From now on, you are guard number 1. Number 1 at the bow, number 2 at the stern, number 3 on the port side, number 4 on the starboard side. Move out. With analytical logic and a leader guiding them, the 4 robots immediately rolled into position. Once that was done, I notified Chin Shun to enforce another curfew, then pulled the Stealing Heavenly Secrets talisman from my storage space. Whether it's a dragon or a mule, we'll only know once we take it out to sea. Even though the Hope was a pseudo-legendary ship, I still wanted to witness it entering the water myself. For the first test, I wasn't asking for much. Just a smooth launch into the water would be a win. Whether we could make it to the Great Region was a problem for later. Talisman World, I choose to enter. I learned my lesson this time. The moment the words left my mouth, I stepped back before touching the talisman. The shockwave hit, but I only stumbled slightly before regaining my balance. The talisman vanished, leaving behind a blue portal of light right on the deck, just big enough for one person to pass through. Without hesitation, carrying my faith and the excitement swelling in my chest, I charged straight in. The test world opened. The Hope was preparing to set sail. Or, unlike last time, where I was knocked out by the shockwave and dragged into the absurd talisman world, this time, when I crashed into the portal of light, I immediately realized I wasn't unconscious. Except for my hearing, which could clearly pick up the sound of waves crashing against the reefs, every other part of me was disconnected from my nervous system. I commanded my eyes to open. My eyelids were as heavy as stone, unmoving. I tried to lift my hand. My consciousness reported back that there was no hand to lift. If this were a 3D game, I'd probably have 3 giant question marks hovering over my head right now. Compared to the sensation of losing my body, what bothered me more was something was scanning me. Clear, sharp. It felt like some physical entity was probing, searching for information. I wanted to open my mouth to protest, but the system essentially said, "You have no mouth." Helpless, I tried to focus on something else. Calling up the control panel yielded no response. I was more clinically dead than when I entered the ruins. But when I called for the system panel popped up normally, its green light shining in the darkness. Thank God. The system was still running and didn't report any danger, meaning this process was under control. The biggest question was, what the hell was that thing scanning me looking for? By the dim light, I caught a faint glimpse of a silhouette in the darkness. The gaze sweeping back and forth from that direction was clearly the source of the scan. I couldn't expand my perception, but after making sure the figure showed no malice, I relaxed a bit and waited. The waves continued to rhythmically tap against the rocks like a lullaby. Waiting endlessly with no danger in sight, I got sleepy and drifted off without even realizing it. That gaze, as if sensing I was fast asleep, scanned me intensely a few last times before vanishing. It had been over 10 days. I had only been sleeping 3 or 4 hours a day. With no one to disturb me and no fear of running out of time, I fell into a rare, peaceful sleep. So much so that when I was jolted awake and opened my eyes, I hadn't even had time to dream. Attention, remaining time in this map, 8 hours, 59 minutes, 59 seconds. Within a 100 kilometers radius, all living creatures have been forcibly expelled from the area. You may leave at any time as long as you are not in a combat state. The notification repeated 3 times, loud enough to wake the dead. But more importantly, all my bodily sensations had returned. I had my arms, my legs. I could breathe, I could move. My body was completely back. And the moment my vision cleared, I realized I was lying exactly where I had first stepped into the portal of light. But there was one difference. Before, the moon was bright and clear. Now, the moon was blood red, its light spilling onto the ground, carrying a bizarre, metallic stench. Sigh. Last time I passed out to get in. This time I didn't pass out, but fell asleep instead. God really loves messing with me. 2 trips into this world, and I still hadn't grasped the talisman's secret. But at least this time, it didn't play dead like before. It actively gave me notifications. I deduced a few key points. First, within a 100 kilometers radius around me, all living creatures had been forcibly pushed out. Living creatures meant anything alive. Second, to leave the map, I couldn't be in a combat state. That meant before exploring the Grand Canyon, I had to be extremely careful. If I got pinned down by alien races, I'd lose precious time. Third, the time I entered this instance was probably the same as last time. There was only half an hour left until the disaster began. I lightly brushed the dust off my clothes and grabbed the railing next to me. Having analyzed the key points, I didn't waste another second and immediately shifted gears, springing to my feet. The blood moon was up. The disaster was imminent. This time, stealing heavenly secrets operated smoothly. Right time, right place, without a single glitch. Just like last time, exactly 3 minutes after the blood moon appeared, the previously locked game interface finally lit up, accompanied by the familiar beep beep. In the top right corner of the screen, exactly as I predicted, was the countdown to the next disaster event, 26 minutes and 35 seconds. Disaster event, Awakening of the Sea God. Current water level, 18 meters. At the 18-meter mark, the Hope's current payload was around 3,000 tons, with a draft of about 3.5 meters. But since I didn't know what form the Sea God's awakening would take this time, I had to prepare a comprehensive response plan. I closed the interface, glanced at the time, less than half an hour left, and immediately sprinted toward the first-floor cockpit. Whether it's a ship weighing a few dozen tons or an oil tanker weighing tens of thousands of tons, launching a ship is always a game of luck. It sounds weird, but it's true. Sometimes luck is more important than skill. From tiny boats flipping sideways to 1,000-ton frigates from Asen's country capsizing right on the spot. Ship launches like this happened all the time on Earth. Thanks to my previous exchanges with the Tundra Shelter, I had a pretty good grasp of the launch procedures used by modern navies. There are 2 main directions for launching, divided into 5 primary methods. Skipping the dry dock method, which is safe but requires extremely high infrastructure. The only way I could do it was by sliding it off a slipway. Among those, there are 3 types. First, stern-first launching. This is what I'm using for the Hope. The ship is built on a slipway, stern facing the sea. When the water rises enough, you adjust the sliding angle. Release the stoppers, and the ship slides down the ramp into the water, generating massive buoyancy while avoiding damage to the propellers and rudder. Second, side launching. The slipway is horizontal, using lateral thrust to tilt the ship into the sea. The risk is extremely high. It's easy to bend the hull or smash equipment. It's usually only used for small boats. Third, using a crane. I don't have the equipment, so forget it. I chose the safest method, stern-first launching. But that didn't mean there were no risks. If the water didn't rush in like a tsunami but seeped up from the ground, causing the water level to rise slowly, then with the same buoyancy, the ship could easily run aground or capsize. I had to unlock the slipway tilt at a 3-meter water level and open the water barriers when it reached 5 meters. Before that, if the water rose past 2 meters and I hadn't tilted it in time, the sliding angle would be off, posing a massive risk. If the Hope ran aground, it could still be saved. But if it capsized, it was truly game over. The Hope's engine in the Talisman world was still empty. I slipped down to the lower deck through the secret passage. I poured in a liter of nether energy water to activate the engine. By the time I got back, there were exactly 20 minutes left. In these 20 minutes, I had to complete turning on the main breaker, configuring the autopilot, activating the fire control radar, syncing the core control system with the ship's data, checking all breakers and locks, sealing all access points to the deck. A total of 37 tasks. If I were alone, even if I were 10 times faster, I couldn't finish them all. Fortunately, the 4 mechanic robots that had repaired the ship earlier weren't counted as living creatures and were still functioning normally. I delegated the 20-plus tasks inside the cabin to them, while I sprinted straight to the 3rd floor to turn on the fire control radar. 3 to 5 seconds later, beep, beep, the radar booted up. I immediately ran down to the 1st floor and opened the radar data reception channel. Even though this was my first time piloting a ship in actual combat, my movements were steady. A bit clumsy, maybe, but clearly grounded in proper training. Those skills didn't come from system simulations, but were accumulated from the times I activated the destroyer blueprint before. Relying on that, I flipped all the physical breakers and booted up the core operating system I had written myself. I named it Water God Gong Gong, carrying a bit of Huasia's superstitious hope for good luck. The icon was the familiar image of Gong Gong smashing into Mount Buzhou. Water God Gong Gong booted successfully. Radar data connection complete. Beginning terrain simulation. Simulating water launch. Hope 3D model generated successfully. 500 m surrounding terrain simulated. Hope electrical systems check complete. Mechanical breakers check complete. Ready. Error 351. Mechanic number 2. Urgently check the 3rd floor discharge switch. Error 669. Mechanic number 4. bring tools to fix the starboard collision radar. Running the full system for the first time, I didn't expect it to throw over a dozen errors right off the bat. These errors never showed up during the simulation runs. The reason was simple. In a real run, all components hogged resources simultaneously, causing conflicts. With 16 minutes left, I assigned the mechanics to handle all the minor bugs, while I rushed out onto the deck to fix errors on the spot. Luckily, they were all minor issues. The mechanics worked incredibly fast. By the time I returned to the cockpit, the 4 mechanics had just finished up as well. 4 minutes left. Made it. No time to hesitate. Run the checks again. Water God Gong Gong. Restart the water launch simulation. My hands flew across the keyboard like a blur. The autopilot system entered its final diagnostic loop. 3 minutes. 23%. 2 minutes. 69%. No errors. 1 minute. 92%. Still green. 22 seconds. A series of green check marks lit up brightly. Water God Gong Gong officially took over the water launch sequence. I didn't wait a second longer, dashing out of the cockpit and sprinting all the way to the bow. Time was squeezing every second, but the Hope's foundation was solid. All procedures were completed in time. Just in the final 20 seconds, as I stood firmly at the bow, humanity's 4th disaster finally erupted. Log. 5 seconds until the 4th disaster, awakening of the sea god. All humanity, prepare. Log. Countdown. 4 seconds. Log. Countdown. 3 seconds. In the Talisman world, the game interface only allowed checking basic info. Panels like chat, crafting, trading, and storage were completely locked. The disaster countdown panel still popped up automatically before every cataclysm, and this time was no different. No one knew where the sea would surge from, nor did anyone understand how those waves would crash down upon this desolate world. I stood at the bow, gripping the railing tightly, tensely scanning all 4 directions. Regarding the formation of oceans on Earth, before I crossed over, there were 2 major accepted theories. Each side had its own reasoning and supporters. One was the extraterrestrial theory. Water came from water-bearing asteroids colliding with Earth about 3.9 billion years ago. Sounds plausible, but as time went on, more and more data contradicted it. Eventually, it was treated as a fairy tale on par with the flat Earth theory. The second was the endogenous theory. Water originated from within the Earth itself. Asteroid impacts formed the planet, and the heat from the collisions and radioactive elements melted the entire primordial magma mass. When chemical reactions separated water from minerals, rain poured down for tens of thousands of years, and the oceans were formed. But the way the ocean appeared this time was completely different from the previous flood. I shivered slightly. If the sea surged like before, rolling in from the horizon like a tsunami, there was still a way to survive. As long as I survived the initial sweep, I could steer the ship to drift and wait for the water to rise gradually. But if this time it was an apocalyptic rainstorm like the Noah's Ark scenario, then all those creatures who naively thought this was just the sea god awakening would be wiped out in the very first minute. The countdown had just stopped. The ground was still eerily quiet. An extremely bad premonition shot down my spine. Damn it! If it's rain, how much has to fall to create an ocean massive enough to cover 80% of the wasteland? Before I could even calculate it, the dark clouds in the sky had gathered into a thick, almost absolute black mass. Inside those clouds, a blood-red vortex swirled faintly, looking like it was about to plunge down. Every hair on my body stood on end. Humanity's 4th disaster, the ocean's uprising. If it really used rain to create an ocean covering 80% of the wasteland's surface, then Li Bai's poem, Water Flies Down 3,000 Feet, as if the Milky Way falls from the sky, would no longer be a literary metaphor. It would be reality. I gritted my teeth. No, the game and the disasters were 2 different systems. The game didn't control the disasters, nor could it stop them. The ultimate goal of the disasters, since the very beginning, had always been one thing: to annihilate all remaining living creatures. Even though I was in the Talisman world, protected by stealing heavenly secrets, a chill still ran down my spine. With just a thought, I could leave this world in an instant. But if I left, 7 days later, humanity would have to face this great flood, a furious slap from the gods. The rain didn't just bring water, it brought destructive energy. Those standing on their ships waiting for the water to rise so they could set sail, those still standing on the wasteland looking up at the disaster. All of them would be crushed into mud by every single drop of that rain. A thought flashed through my mind. The radar system and all the structures on the Hope's deck were exposed. If the rain fell like a collapsing sky, it would trip all the breakers right from the start. The dark clouds grew thicker, as if swallowing the entire sky. Without another thought, I turned and sprinted straight for the cockpit. Now wasn't the time to worry about how to get out to sea. It was about how to survive the rain about to pour down on my head. If the ship's core was destroyed, even if the ocean formed, even if the ship floated, it would all be meaningless. I ran for my life. Every breath felt like a drum beating in my chest. The cockpit was right in front of me. I gave it everything I had and dove inside. Before the door could even close, the sky lit up. A massive bolt of lightning, enough to tear the wasteland in half, struck down from the extreme south to the extreme north. The light was so blinding it turned the whole world stark white. And then, a deafening crack of thunder that threatened to tear my eardrums apart. Immediately after, the rain poured down. At first, it was just like a heavy shower, only unusually dense. But exactly 3 seconds later, the rain suddenly escalated, both in density and falling speed. It was as if someone had cranked a storm dial to the max. I immediately barked orders. Gong gong. Turn on all ship lights. Switch engines to warm-up mode. Radar to maximum power. Scan all terrain within a 1-kilometer radius. Route all cameras to the main screen. Record the impact force of the rain on the deck. Generate a drainage model immediately. Even though the sky was falling outside, I forced myself to stay calm. With just a few inputs, the third-floor radar spun up, scanning continuously. 8 searchlights flared to life, illuminating the entire hull. Feeds from the bow and stern cameras instantly popped up. In just 2 minutes, the rainfall had jumped from annoying to terrifying. It was as if some alien AI was controlling the climate. Thankfully, Gong Gong was still running stably. Based on the data, the system built a linear model. Every 3 seconds, the rainfall increased by 1 level. It was like a quadratic equation climbing straight up. If it kept up this pace, by the 15th minute, the rain would reach the level of a waterfall dropping in 10 seconds. The radar would definitely be the first thing to break. But the cockpit could still hold. The third-floor command room and the second-floor meeting room were the core areas, reinforced with a meter of solid steel. Even if a heavenly waterfall smashed right into them, there was still a chance of survival. As the camera zoomed in on the bow, I saw something that sparked a glimmer of hope. The sea wasn't just coming from the rain. The ground was leaking water, as if the earth was crying. Water surged up from underground. The speed was still slow, but it was also escalating every 3 seconds. Just like the rain, rising from both the sky and the earth. If the rain stopped at the right time, in just 30 minutes, the low-lying areas would flood over 5 meters deep, and the Hope would have a chance to set sail. Humanity would have a chance to survive. It wasn't the original scenario, but this time it opened a path to the sea for me. As long as I turned the ship around and dug a deep pit at the stern, I could launch at stern first. It would be much smoother. Even without system assistance, piloting it manually wouldn't be a problem. Knowing the mechanics of the 4th disaster and how to upgrade the Hope, I considered this simulation's goal achieved. The next step was to try piloting the Hope off the slipway in actual combat conditions. If I succeeded, the simulation was a massive win. If I failed, it was still invaluable experience. Thinking this, I calmed down and adjusted the ship's status, keeping an optimistic mindset. The rain grew fiercer by the second. The water rose higher and higher. The drainage ports on the deck were already roaring from overload. I didn't know when, but the water at my feet had already reached my ankles. Luckily, the main server was placed on a 3-meter-high rack, so it was safe for now. I had to focus to the absolute limit. One hand recording data in a notebook, the other monitoring the simulation. By the 9th minute, the rainfall had far exceeded human imagination. If it rained like this for 24 hours straight, the total precipitation would exceed 3,000 millimeters, and then keep doubling. By the 12th minute, before the heavenly waterfall even dropped, the fire control radar was crushed. It only managed to send one last string of data to Gong Gong before collapsing, the sound of the crash echoing across the deck. By minute 13 and 40 seconds, only 2 cameras salvaged from the shipyard were still holding on. The 4 cameras bought from the black market had all shut down one by one, likely due to fried circuits or blown transmission lines. By minute 14 and 25 seconds, the water in the cockpit had risen to mid-thigh. I was forced to climb onto the control console, holding the simulation monitor high up toward the 3-meter rack. By minute 14 and 39 seconds, the last 2 cameras also perished. From that moment on, I had no visual feed left, only the endlessly rising water. The cockpit was flooded nearly 2 meters deep, and the central electrical cabinet, the heart of the ship, was sitting right at that mark. Just a few more seconds, and all power would be cut. Minute 14, 51 seconds, the ship lost all power. Every light snapped off. Gong gong, lacking backup power, quietly shut down. Seizing the last second before plunging into darkness, I jumped and forcefully tossed the simulation monitor onto the rack. Minute 14, 57 seconds, I gripped the fixed handrail tightly. I knew I could pull out of the simulation at any time. If I bailed now, I'd only lose an hour. But the next time I came back, I'd still have to take this hit. So then, I'll be stubborn. I'll fight to the bitter end. No power, no radar, no data, no system. The Hope was now nothing more than a lifeless block of steel in the middle of the apocalypse. I opened the ship's attribute panel. Minute 15, hell opened its doors. Crash, crash. Every second, the sound of impacts rolled like thunder, drilling straight into my ears. The Hope's durability dropped by the second, nearly 1,000 points a second. After 5 seconds, the water had reached my chest. My hands were bleeding from gripping the rail, but I had to grit my teeth and hold on tight, so I wouldn't be swept away. The 6th second, the captain's quarters on the 3rd floor collapsed. Luckily, the strategic bunker right above it was still holding. Hope, keep fighting for me. Don't you dare fall. If you want to be a legend, you have to survive hell. If the ship is a legend, the captain must be a legend too. The 10th second, the shockwaves were so intense that blood seeped from my eyes, ears, nose, and mouth. I almost passed out, but I still hugged the rail tightly, bracing myself, taking the beating. And then, exactly as Gong Gong had calculated, at the 11th second, after one final, heavy, furious smash, the rain stopped. Gurgle, gurgle. When the heavenly waterfall completely ceased, the only sound left in the world was the water receding around the hull. The rain came as if to wipe the world clean, and left so unbelievably fast. If it weren't for the water churning at my feet and the rapid, continuous sound of it draining, I would have thought it was all a hallucination. 15 minutes and 10 seconds. In just the last 3 seconds, the rain poured one final wave, and then, as if someone hit the pause button, everything suddenly stopped in midair. The dark clouds dispersed with bizarre speed, revealing the same silver moon as before. Phew, phew. Good thing I was used to living in a 4.2-meter high shelter, which is why I modified the cockpit to a similar height. Otherwise, I'd definitely be dead. Looking down at the water line that had reached the base of the 3-meter pillar, I was still terrified. No one could have expected the disaster to strike in such a freakish way. It wasn't a pitter-patter of rain, but a literal waterfall dumping straight from the sky, smashing into the ground. No matter how wild your imagination was, no one could have predicted this kind of attack. The Hope had been drained of over 20,000 durability points. It had less than 10,000 left. If that waterfall rain had lasted another 20 seconds, even if the ship wasn't pierced from above, its structural integrity would have been pulverized. After 15 minutes of that, I doubt even 1/10,000th of humanity's population would survive. I sighed, patiently waiting for the water to recede. The Hope's drainage capability wasn't bad. After just 3 or 4 minutes, the water in the cockpit had dropped below 2 meters and was still falling. Moonlight pierced through the windows shattered by the water, shining inside. I saw blood smeared all over my face. No, I have to go out and check the damage immediately. Otherwise, these injuries would be for nothing. I'll treat this rain attack as an emergency test for the Hope, simulating how to handle a similar situation out at sea. As the water receded from my neck to my waist, then to my legs, it felt like I had just stepped out of a swimming pool. Without buoyancy, every step felt as heavy as carrying 1,000 pounds. My body ached dully from the shock waves. The feeling was absolutely fantastic. But there was no time to complain. If I didn't even dare to risk it in a simulation, what would I have to cling to in reality? Thinking this, I pushed through the water, shoved the iron door of the cockpit open, and stepped out. Without the door blocking it, water gushed out with a roar. And then, my jaw dropped. What? Oh my God. With this steel thickness, even naval artillery wouldn't necessarily punch holes like that. Under the moonlight, a scene of utter devastation lay before me. The beautifully lined deck was gone. In its place were pitch-black craters, as big as cars, punched straight through the deck, exposing the crew quarters below. And as I walked over to inspect it, it wasn't just the main deck that was pierced. The second-floor deck was also punched through, exposing the cargo hold all the way down. Most of the supplies I had just moved in were now soaking in water, bobbing along with every wave alongside the Hope. Amidst the churning water, I even saw a few pieces of the fire control radar, smashed so badly there was no chance of salvaging them. Damn it! If stealing heavenly secrets hadn't warned me, I'd probably be gleefully steering the Hope out to sea right now. Who would have thought that right after the rain stopped, before it even hit the water, the ship would practically collapse in front of everyone? Talk about a shattered dream. Even though this was just a simulation, seeing the Hope this battered, I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. But after walking a full lap, I managed to come up with a few ways to defend against this kind of waterfall rain. It wouldn't be too hard to counter the downpour that nearly destroyed the Hope. I just needed to build a dry dock-style warehouse over it to act as a shield. On the roof of the warehouse, I'd attach a few layers of shock-absorbing materials. When the rain stopped, I'd just drive the ship straight out. Add a reverse launch design, and the Hope could easily escape. Right now, after 18 minutes, the water level had risen over 2 meters. At this rate, in just 20 minutes, it would hit 4 to 5 meters. And once it crossed 5 meters, the Hope would officially meet the conditions to set sail. That's right. Even though the ship was currently a pile of scrap metal, with a fearless spirit, I decided to take the Hope out to sea once. At least, until I was forced to exit the simulation. As long as the ship wasn't completely destroyed, I would hold on to the bitter end to complete the planned test. Since this was a simulation, I didn't bother clearing the stagnant water on the second and third floors. After gathering all the debris on the deck, I threw it down through the holes, then returned to where the dream had begun. 5 minutes of draining passed. The cockpit was still damp, but at least it wasn't flooded. Walking on the slippery floor, I opened the secret hatch leading to the engine room and slid down the ladder. Thank goodness. The engine room was made of thick steel and located at the bottom deck, so it hadn't taken any damage. The hatch was designed to be airtight and waterproof, so both the ladder and the engine room were bone dry, untouched by the remnants of the waterfall rain. Even without power, the total material conversion engine still emitted a deep blue glow, silently operating. As long as the energy tank had 1 liter of nether energy water, it could provide stable power to the entire ship. I switched it to water pumping mode. In just 1 minute, the system was running smoothly, putting my mind at ease regarding the propulsion. No child cries forever, and no gambler loses forever. I've already suffered this much. Could it get any worse? The deck was mashed, the radar was dead, the cockpit was cracked. But the bottom of the ship and the engine room were still as solid as a rock. As long as I restored power, the Hope could still ride the waves. Let's see. When loading the ship, I told Shin-shun to stock up on some repair supplies. I couldn't open the system storage, but I wasn't in a rush. Returning to the first floor from the stairs, I followed the massive holes to the leaking warehouse. The repair supplies for the Hope were all marked with yellow exclamation points and wrapped in waterproof canvas, making them very easy to find. Without much effort, I gathered enough electrical repair tools. It really sucks being bullied because I can't use the system in the Talisman world. If I were in the wasteland, I could fix this instantly with 5,000 survival points, instead of dragging myself around like this. During the earlier ghost ship phase, the system could still be summoned. But after that part, whether it was disabled or just lazy, no matter how I called it, it wouldn't answer. Still, with the right tools, the repairs weren't too difficult. The Hope's wiring was all routed through the steel layers, so very few parts needed replacing. Even without the mechanic robot's help, I managed to fumble my way through a temporary patch job. These repairs would only hold for 2 to 3 days, maybe a day and a half at worst. But it was more than enough to get through the current situation. I flipped the main power breaker. The entire system booted up, ran a diagnostic, and stabilized as if nothing had happened. As the current flowed back, the searchlights that had gone dark lit up one by one. Out of 8 lights, 3 survived. That's good enough. Looking at the light piercing out from the deck, I laughed out loud. All the frustration from the disaster nearly vanished. If I could survive something that brutal, what was launching into the sea compared to that? I turned around, wiped the water off the control panel, climbed up the steel rack to retrieve the monitor I had thrown up there, and casually rebooted the system. Right now, the Hope was practically blind. No fire control radar, no camera feeds. Only the 4 collision avoidance radars, front, back, left, and right, scanning within a 50-meter radius. It was a pitiful amount of data, but better than nothing. To launch into the sea, I had to pilot it manually, relying on the remaining data and my gut feeling to determine when to activate each component. Port side of the Hope, water level 3.84 meters. Starboard, 3.15 meters. A difference of nearly 0.7 meters. A bit tense, but still manageable. Gong, when the port side reaches 4.14 meters, immediately open the slipway rails. Calculate buoyancy using physics formulas to determine the exact launch timing. This was the safest plan right now. As for just dropping the ship straight into the sea when the water was high enough to support its entire weight, I scrapped that idea from the start. Currently, the Hope was secured by scaffolding that came with the modular shipyard. The structure was excellent. As long as the load-bearing points weren't hit directly, even the waterfall rain wouldn't knock it all down. Because of that, the ship could sit majestically half a meter above the ground, waiting for the water to rise. As for raising it to 4 meters like a real dry dock, sorry, not even in my dreams. Not enough materials, not enough conditions. And that method wouldn't be any easier to control than a reverse launch. With its current displacement, the Hope didn't need anything that flashy. From the moment I entered the Talisman world until now, after all the scrambling, over an hour had passed. After I ran back and forth between the deck and the cockpit no less than a dozen times, the water level finally reached the exact mark I had given Gong. Because the water rose so fast in the later stages, the surface level on both sides of the ship now had a 0.4 meter difference. Even so, standing on the deck, I could clearly feel the ship starting to tilt to the right. This was both good news and a cause for concern. Good, because the buoyancy was finally strong enough for the Hope to prepare its leap into the sea. Bad, because if the buoyancy calculation was off by even a few percent when entering the water, the ship could completely capsize. I just hoped the seawater beneath my feet shared the same properties as Earth's. Otherwise, all my buoyancy models based on Earth data would be completely useless. Seeing the ocean in the wasteland for the first time, yet unable to go down and check it directly, I could only hope everything here wasn't too different from home. Otherwise, all my numbers would be a joke. Fortunately, as the water rose faster and faster, thanks to the collision radar and my own visual estimates, after dozens of checks, the 4.15 meter mark was finally reached. The slipway rails behind the Hope immediately let out a clack. Every iron joint groaned under the tension as Gong ordered the pillars to rise. Even though the bow's weight was partially supported by buoyancy, the hull was still incredibly heavy, making the lifting process worryingly slow. Crap. When designing the model, I only calculated the water level for the drop, not the incline increasing with the speed of the rising water. If I redid the model now, it would take at least a few dozen minutes. Whatever. A clumsy launch is still a launch. Since I'm risking it, I'll risk it all the way. The old model was no longer flexible enough. I decisively snatched full control back from Gong. The rails were still rising, but the speed was clearly insufficient. Releasing the ship before the rails were fully raised went completely against the system's safety logic. An AI like Gong, even if forced, wouldn't dare take the risk. Only I would dare to make that bet. I stared intently at the screen, tracking every change in buoyancy at the bow, stern, port, and starboard. The air still held a lingering chill from the heavy rain, yet my forehead began to bead with sweat. The buoyant force on an object in a fluid equals the weight of the displaced fluid. That means F equals mg. For the Hope to achieve 3,000 tons of buoyancy, the equivalent force was 3 times 10 to the power of 7 newtons. Every second, for buoyancy data points updated, corresponding to the 4 sections of the ship. Only when all 4 points balanced out would the Hope have a chance of survival. Otherwise, everything would be left to fate. This time, I really didn't want to gamble. Even though the starboard and bow had reached the standard, I gritted my teeth and waited. Port side was still 2% short. Stern reached it. I'm not waiting anymore. Drop. I roared, yanking the control lever hard. Rumble. The rails in the back were still slowly rising, not yet in position, but the rear barrier dropped at blinding speed. In the span of 3 to 5 breaths, the barrier fully opened. I flipped the iron cover on the right and slammed the red button. A booming explosion echoed as the remote-controlled explosives attached to the scaffolding's load-bearing points detonated. Not too powerful, just enough to gradually break the metal frames holding the Hope, allowing the ship to begin a controlled tilt. Without its fixed anchors, the Hope finally leaned back, but heavily to the right. No visual data, no imaging radar. Relying solely on the collision radar, I could only visualize the ship's current position on the water. On the screen, the situation was extremely critical. The entry angle couldn't exceed 25 degrees. Right now, the ship had hit 35 degrees. If this continued, the chance of capsizing was extremely high. Because the rails hadn't finished rising, the Hope's sliding speed into the sea was dangerously fast. It had to be delayed immediately. I glued my eyes to the screen, but the closer I got to the life or death moment, the calmer my heart became. All the knowledge from the destroyer blueprint automatically surfaced in my mind. Whether it was a modern warship or an ancient galley powered by human strength, the true test of a captain was never when the ship was gliding smoothly over the water. It was whether they dared to step up and shoulder the burden in moments of extreme peril. In the real world, maybe I would hesitate. But in this talisman world, engines, full power, maximum output, push it to the absolute limit. Facing the chaotic, uncontrollable data, I just smiled fiercely, my right hand yanking the engine throttle all the way down. Intervening with propulsion to adjust the angle while the ship was falling into the water was absolute madness. But I did it anyway. The moment the lever dropped, the total material conversion engine instantly received the command. Light and heat flared wildly. A massive surge of energy surged through cables as thick as a wrist, channeling straight to the bottom of the ship, causing the duct propellers to spin like crazy. The propellers, over 3 meters in diameter, had barely plunged into the 4.5-meter deep water before creating a massive whirlpool, causing the entire ship to shudder and stall. Keep pushing. Hold the thrust. Thanks to that force, the tilt angle dropped from 37 degrees to 28 degrees, buying me 18 golden seconds to adjust the ship's posture before it fully hit the water. Overjoyed, I immediately transferred control back to Gong Gong and bolted out of the cockpit. At this moment, the bow had breached the surface. The stern, due to the steep angle and rapid descent, had plunged 5 to 6 meters deep. To successfully launch the ship, a massive downward thrust from the bow was needed to slam it down, allowing the hull to rise on the water's buoyancy. For a normal ship, this was impossible. But the Hope was different. Looking at the attribute panel and seeing the special skill activated, I bypassed the numerous holes and rushed straight to the bow, where the flag was radiating a red-gold light like fire. The precious 18 seconds were now down to 3. The stern was submerged by 17 meters. Standing tall at the bow, I gripped the glowing flag tightly, without a shred of hesitation. Hope. Charge. Activate. I had never seen this special energy manifest with my own eyes. But the moment my shout ended, the red-gold light from the flag instantly spread across the entire ship, so fast it left me stunned in place. The entire 80-meter hull was enveloped in a layer of divine light, so bright it illuminated the sky and the sea. In that instant, the Hope didn't need engines, didn't need oars. A power seemingly from the heavens slammed straight into the bow, forcing it down. The stern, previously submerged at 17 meters, instantly plunged to 40 meters in a single breath. And when it hit the seabed, all the compressed buoyancy violently rebounded, launching the ship upward like it was bouncing on a trampoline. The The submerged stern shot back out of the water, then slammed back onto the surface like a heavenly hammer, creating a water column tens of meters high. The forward thrust from the bow didn't stop. With a violent jerk, the entire ship broke free from the remaining scaffolding, shooting straight toward the horizon like a missile. The massive rebound sent me, who was clinging to the bow railing, flying off the ship. But just as the ship spun 180 degrees and bounced back, the rotational force threw me right back into the hull. It was exactly like a roller coaster ride. Before I could even enjoy the crazy sensation, the Hope took flight. The ship, still glowing with red gold light, blasted forward at a speed of 55 knots, nearly 100 kilometers per hour, charging straight west. Holy Mother of God. It actually worked. My body had been tossed around twice. My right leg was bent into a Z shape, the pain so intense I almost passed out. But the more it hurt, the more I felt the terrifying power the Hope had just unleashed when entering the water. An 80-meter-long ship that, just minutes ago, was struggling to get into the water and nearly capsized. Yet, with just one activation, it turned into a streak across the sea, tearing through the ocean. Carrying my half-paralyzed body and a hull riddled with holes, nearly broken in half. Yet the Hope was still a living legend, displaying a pseudo-legendary caliber I had never seen before. After 5 minutes of speeding, the ship crossed 9 kilometers of flat terrain to the west, then gradually slowed down. The red gold light retracted back into the flag in my hand. Incredible. Only when it truly hit the sea could it be called the Hope. I looked back toward the Iron Rock Mountain and the shelter, which had now receded far beyond my line of sight. With that speed, in just 5 minutes, I had returned right to the carp pond from last time. A speed like that was truly unrivaled. But looking down at my mangled body, with only my left arm still able to move, I could only force a bitter smile. The first test run. All objectives achieved. Launch test. Check. Extreme piloting test. Check. Heavy damage operation test. Check. Everything was perfect. But trying to take the ship to the Grand Canyon with Gong Gong in its current blind state was practically impossible. Not bad. This time only took 2 hours. I still have 7 hours left. With this much experience, the next time I come back, I'll definitely clear this stage without getting hurt. As for now, looking down at my nearly paralyzed body, I laughed out loud. Exit. Last time I entered the Talisman world, I was knocked out, and when I left, I was asleep before returning to the real world. So this time, after mentally commanding the exit, I immediately opened my eyes, wanting to see exactly what kind of technology transferred my consciousness between two worlds. But this so-called magical talisman disappointed me. The moment the word exit left my lips, the sky flashed with a golden light. It struck straight down. The light was so blinding I had to squeeze my eyes shut. When I opened them, I was still standing on the Hope. Same position, same view. But everything else, the smashed radar, the crushed control room, the deck riddled with holes, the tangled wiring. All the damage in the Talisman world had been restored as if it never existed. The main world was so peaceful it left me in a daze. I used to think stealing heavenly secrets was just high-tech. But perhaps it involved some sort of authority. Behind this seemingly ordinary talisman, there might be a massive secret hidden. The paralyzed body in the Talisman world was gone too. Strength surged through my entire body. I sprang up like a carp, grabbed the hovering, stealing heavenly secrets talisman, and studied it intently. Being able to simulate the next disaster with such realism, only sending consciousness in, and only consuming energy, this kind of technology far exceeded anything I had ever imagined. And while pondering this, I suddenly thought of a loophole. If the talisman only wiped out living creatures within a 100 kilometers radius of me, then I just needed to tell a villager to go somewhere beyond that distance. When I entered the talisman, I could just contact them via radio to find out if this place was real or fake. I could even find out what would happen before the disaster struck. It would be no different from seeing the future. For example, before entering, I could tell Chin Shin to explore the Grand Canyon 2 days later. When I entered the talisman and contacted him, I'd know the results of the expedition before it even happened. But if I did that, wouldn't it create a paradox? Leaning against the railing, looking at the stealing heavenly secrets talisman with only 7 energy bars left, I temporarily shelved this dangerous idea. The reason was simple. I was too weak. One trip out to sea nearly cost me my life. Even if I uncovered the secret or hacked this bug, I didn't have the strength to do anything major with it. If I broke a taboo, lost all the energy, and ran out of ways to test things, I'd be doomed. I'll just keep it in mind for now. If I can't explore it now, I'll leave it for later. To be safe, I stored the talisman in my inventory, put aside all my worries, and immediately shifted my focus to upgrading the Hope. First, I need to build a defense layer strong enough so the ship doesn't get destroyed by the waterfall rain right in the first round next time. Second, optimize the Gong system. Its logic is too rigid. A data conflict makes it freeze like a log. Third, I must dig a reverse launch pit immediately. Next time, I have to launch without taking any damage. Fourth, reinforce the internal rigid structures to maximize the strength of the steel. Last time, the steel didn't break, but the joints were pierced. I can't let that happen again. Fifth, I need to build a backup fire control radar. If that breaks, the ship goes blind and the whole system crashes. Sixth, all the bugs that popped up during the simulation must be reviewed from start to finish, recorded, and fixed immediately. I cannot repeat the same mistakes. Getting 6 major upgrade directions from a single test run was incredibly valuable, far beyond my expectations. But besides those 6 points, as I looked toward Iron Rock Mountain and the bright lights just 2 kilometers away, I suddenly finalized a 7th upgrade goal. Hope Village was located on Iron Rock Mountain, so landslides weren't a concern. But since everyone had hollowed out the mountain to live inside, a defense system had to be built immediately. With the current tent-style housing, they'd be washed away by the flood by the 13th minute, let alone the 15th minute with the waterfall rain. Just the first 2 minutes would be enough to drown the entire village. Not to mention the other survivors. Just thinking about the impending disaster and the current complacent mindset of humanity made my head want to explode. Even though I possessed the Hope, a pseudo-divine warship, I never dared to underestimate natural disasters and the ocean. I was careful with every step, and then even more cautious. But among the current human population, at least 30% of those who had struck it rich from the previous blessing disasters had completely forgotten their fear of nature. Open the world chat, and you'd see arrogant talk everywhere. Exterminate the alien races. Conquer the new continent. Humanity united. Tens of billions of people can crush any creature. Let's get rich. There were even groups dreaming of pioneering new lands. Instigated by a few people with ulterior motives. If I hid the information about the disaster and didn't issue a warning, then 6 days from now, in just 15 minutes, that crowd would fly straight to heaven to enjoy their dream future. And over 70% of humanity would follow in their footsteps, turning into nothingness. Well, this requires long-term planning. I'll wait until the second simulation, when I have more information, before figuring out how to announce it. I recorded everything in my notebook and stored it in my inventory. This time, entering the talisman world consumed energy equivalent to 2 hours. Converted to real time, it should have been less than 2 minutes. But when I took out my brick phone to check the time, I froze. This trip took 49 minutes. Subtracting the 2 hours in the simulation, the testing and exiting process alone ate up 47 minutes. It wasn't long, but it was enough to serve as a wake-up call. Time in the talisman world wasn't fixed. Every entry required absolute caution. Keeping that firmly in mind, I walked down the stairs, left the Hope, and headed straight for the sealed bottom deck. After nearly an hour of preparation, the chaos beneath the ship had finally settled. At the 3rd minute, when the ship reached pseudo-legendary grade and glowed brilliantly, that was also when I completed the binding. The light retracted, converging into the flag at the bow. Although everyone was still full of questions, under Chi Xian's reminders, everyone returned to their posts and continued locking down the area. Within a 2-kilometer radius, the curfew was re-established and order was gradually restored. As soon as I stepped off the ship, I saw Chen Shun and Zhong Qingshu pacing back and forth under the Hope's nameplate, looking incredibly tense. Oh, Brother Su Mo is coming down. The test. From the moment the ship glowed to when it sat silently in the dark without a single searchlight on, Chen Shun had no idea what I was testing. He was just pacing to relieve his stress. When he looked up and saw me, he almost lost his footing. It was a success, right? Compared to Qin Shun, Zhong Qingshu was much sharper. Just by looking at the smile on my face, she had already guessed the result. Not wanting to drag it out, I looked around at the villagers surrounding the ship, feeling a warmth in my heart. Meeting. All management members. Meeting in the shipyard conference room in 20 minutes. Got it. I'll go notify them right away. Watching Qin Shun run off, I led Zhong Qingshu straight to the shipyard. This test run yielded massive results. With Qingshu's intelligence, just a few hints from me, and she would definitely deduce a lot of things, perhaps even coming close to the truth. On the way, I didn't beat around the bush and spoke directly about the upcoming disaster. From the waterfall rain capable of wiping out 90% of living creatures, to the linear escalation of groundwater seepage, I recounted everything clearly. Except for how the ship fought. I kept that part to myself. I shared all the disaster information without hiding anything. Zhong Qingshu was stunned for a moment, but quickly regained her composure. She didn't ask how I knew. She just lowered her head in thought. Seeing this, I wasn't in a rush either. I opened the shipyard door, turned on the lights, and sat down to wait for the managers to arrive. Up to now, humanity had only experienced 3 disasters. One was even a blessing, basically a freebie. Compared to the Yin Kingdom, which had endured dozens of disasters over many years before finally heading out to sea, this time, because I had forcefully accelerated the timeline, the consequences were starting to show. The system's evaluation indicated that most survivors had enough resources, but the problem was, they couldn't quickly convert those resources into combat power. Aside from the underground bunkers and Hope Village, which had some level of protection, the rest of humanity was essentially thrown out to be living targets for the natural disaster. Many large shelters weren't faring much better. Forget modern steel ships. Even their wooden boats were half-finished, plagued by constant accidents. The alien races living on land had also started learning to swim en masse, trying every possible way to build rafts and cross the sea alongside humans. If we push the timeline forward by another year, with the current resources, even nomads could develop a certain level of steel technology. By then, no matter how strong the disaster was, they could survive. But right now, watching each management member walk into the conference room with excitement, I nodded slightly, the anxiety in my heart easing a bit. Humans, from the moment they are born, are always struggling in the mud, fighting through the darkness, taking step after step forward, always on the brink of extinction. It could be an unusually large asteroid or a supernova from outer space. But no matter what it is, I know I have to prepare in advance. It could also be some ancient virus sleeping beneath the glaciers. Just one of those ordinary disasters. Would be enough to wipe out humanity on Earth. And it's the same this time. If we don't overcome it, humanity will definitely go extinct. But if we do overcome it, it will be a massive evolutionary leap. Like a caterpillar turning into a butterfly, leaping to an entirely new level of existence. Qin Shun, Pei Xiao, Zhong Qingshu, Wu Feiguang, Qin, Hong Kong Chung, Qin Yu, plus me. The management team of Hope Village now had a total of 8 people. The 8 of us sitting in this modest conference room looked no different from the board of directors of a major corporation back on Earth, radiating an imposing aura. It's just that, looking closely at that aura, you'd know immediately. It all stemmed from extreme excitement. The Hope reaching legendary grade, and the successful test run. 2 pieces of good news at once. If they weren't already used to my miracles, they probably would have made themselves sick from the excitement. Ahem. Everyone, calm down a bit. As they settled into their seats, before Zhong Qingshu could even open her mouth, Qin Shun stood up and lightly tapped the iron table. Just one tap, and the entire room fell dead silent. Even their breathing hitched. All eyes turned to me, sitting at the head of the table. I called everyone here today to announce one piece of good news and one piece of bad news. Seeing how excited everyone is, let's save the good news for later. Let's talk about the bad news first. Everyone here had survived for 2 months in this apocalyptic wasteland. I had thought it over carefully. There was no need to hide it anymore. The upcoming disaster, they absolutely had to know. Whatever the higher-ups are scheming, for ordinary people like us, from Earth to the apocalypse, our only desire is to keep living. And this time, I don't plan on relying on any government shelters. I'm stepping up to handle this myself. Brother Kanching, How many supplies can we scrape together from the warehouse right now to build defensive structures? With just one sentence, everyone's smiles instantly froze. Defensive structures? What did I mean? The management team were all seasoned veterans. They reacted very quickly. The previous smugness vanished instantly. Director, if it's for anything else, the warehouse is indeed running low. But if it's for defense, even if we have to starve, we have to get it done. If I go collect all the supplies right now, excluding personal rations, to build a defensive wall, trust me, no one will object. Hong Kong-chung, a man nearly 50, had sharp eyes and a tough demeanor that even younger men might not possess. I nodded and gestured for him to sit down. If we have enough supplies, then I'll just say it straight. The ocean world disaster in 6 days is not as simple as we think. If we don't handle it well, the people from Earth will be nearly wiped out. In the first 15 minutes, we will face a super rainstorm. The rainfall will be at least 1,500 millimeters. But that's not the most terrifying part. At the 15th minute, there will be a waterfall rain lasting 10 seconds. Water will pour straight down from thousands of meters high. The force will be enough to crush a person the moment it hits. Bang! Crash! Before I even finished speaking, aside from Zhong Qingshu, everyone shot up from their seats, their faces deathly pale. On Earth, just 250 millimeters of rain a day was an evacuation-level disaster. But 1,500 millimeters in just 15 minutes? Plus a waterfall rain from 1,000 meters up? Who could survive that? Director, this kind of disaster, do we have to start preparing right now? Chi Xian swallowed hard, his voice trembling violently. No one doubted my words, because from the very beginning, I had never predicted wrong. If I hadn't warned them, then the entire Hope Village on top of Iron Rock Mountain would definitely leave no survivors. What are you panicking for? The sky hasn't fallen yet. Sit down. Chun Shin barked to stabilize the situation, but I could clearly see the deep anxiety in his eyes too. As a college graduate, he understood exactly how terrifying the kinetic energy of a column of water falling from 1,000 meters was. Don't be so tense. Suemo hasn't even told us the good news yet. Zhong Qingshu's gentle sentence was more effective than Chun Shin's shout. A glimmer of hope instantly flashed across the room. I just chuckled softly, shook my head, then stood up and looked out the glass window of the shipyard. Where you stand determines what you see. In the morning, they were thinking about what to eat for lunch. In the afternoon, where to inspect construction. I had to sit here and figure out how to face a hellish disaster, and even find a way to use it to our advantage. This shift in mindset really takes time. Information is something that can make money, but 99% of the time, just selling information won't make you big money, let alone earn you both fame and fortune. So, if we announce the information about the disaster for free right now, what will be the direct consequence? As I muttered this, I saw Chen Shun's eyes light up. In that moment, he understood the good news I hadn't mentioned yet. So that's it. From the very beginning, Brother Su Imo wasn't worried about whether we could survive the disaster. He has absolute faith. What he's thinking about is development.